In the estate gardens, Caroline expresses her delight at the beautiful flowers to her brother, Karen, who readily agrees. Nearby, observing them, Zex reaches out and plucks a single white lily. Karen then gently places the flower he picked into Caroline's hair, telling her it fits her perfectly. She beams, thanking her NINI for the gift. As she touches the new accessory in her hair, Karen's expression suddenly shifts to one of concern. Noticing his change in demeanor, Caroline asks him what is wrong. Caroline wonders aloud if picking the flowers was painful for them. Zex observes this, realizing that Karen seems upset for having failed to consider this himself. However, Zex perceives Karen's internal thoughts quickly shifting. He dismisses it as not his fault, concluding that it's enough that he is on track to become a kind person. The gentle scene is shattered by a sudden, jarring memory from Zex's past life, the sharp sting of a hand striking his face. He recalls the vision clearly. A former girlfriend had confronted him, demanding to know who was more important, her or his sister. He had tried to apologize, explaining his obligations were at his parents' request, but she ended their relationship. He remembers his family had love for each other, but a note on a whiteboard reveals his parents' demanding work schedules, often leaving him to manage things at home. His thoughts drift further back to how he always had to stand in for his busy parents and take care of his sickly sister, Nanami. He remembers her calling his name weekly from her bed, and another time, as a child, trying to coax her to eat her carrots. A phone displaying the time, 21:09, underscores the late hours he kept while caring for her. The memory sharpens to a single, quiet moment, his hand gently holding his sister's. Another evening from that time comes to mind. He arrives home with groceries, announcing he'll start making dinner. From the couch, his sister weekly requests his special blend of hot tea. He tells her to take her time, though he admits to himself that he also wants a drink. The memory shifts again to him and his sister playing a video game. She complains about him playing that game again, but he points out it's the combat part and tells her not to push everything she finds difficult onto him. She urges him to continue, explaining that she is on Orikakuin's route, the very game world he now inhabits. He recalls a moment from his past life, checking his younger sister Nanami's temperature. He notes her fever and tells her to go to sleep, but she protests, having resolved to finish a character's route in her game by that night. With a playful smile, she admits she's been found out. She then proposes a compromise. She will lie down and watch while he plays the game in her stead. Resigned, he accepts the offer, thinking to himself that it can't be helped. The memory fades, returning him to the present, where he is now the infant Zex. He remembers finding a picture book about the hero Zeon and the Saintess Kisaragi. His new sister, Caroline, asks if he prefers that type of character. His thoughts, however, drift to Caroline's role as the game's villainess. He recalls her in-game death, where she laments losing to a gutter rat. He internally reflects that he doesn't see her as a villain, but as a pitiful character whom no one ever loved. His mind plunges back into the past. Nanami, resting in bed, calls out to him. With a somber tone, she remarks that she will probably leave mid-game in his life as well. He reacts with alarm, shouting at her not to say something so ominous. Continuing his protective outburst, he declares that in the future, any potential boyfriend will have to get his approval before marriage. Nanami blushes, retorting that such a role belongs to a father, not a sibling. The memory shifts to a grim hospital room. Nanami, weak and on a ventilator, thanks him for being with her. He realizes that while they seemed close, he felt he had been a burden to her. Overcome with grief, he clutches her hand, crying out her name and insisting she was never a bother. He remained by her side, slumped over in defeat as she passed away. That was how his sister's life ended. Shortly after, while standing in the rain at what appears to be her funeral, a voice calls out to him, as sad as San. The person informs him that his parents were in a car accident. The police theorize they had been driving recklessly, desperate to be there for their daughter's last moments. The sudden, successive deaths of his sister and parents instilled in him a crippling fear of losing anyone else. To protect himself from further pain, he stopped forming any meaningful relationships, isolating himself completely. This isolation manifested at his workplace. As a colleague cheerfully invites him to a company drinking session, he declines, claiming to be busy. The colleague insists, warning that management will be angry, but the man remains withdrawn, determined to keep working alone. He recalls the events leading to his end. At a work gathering, his colleagues attempted to draw him out of his shell. One, Anza-san, showed him a picture of his new baby, while another, Satu-san, asked if he was married or had a girlfriend. He answered simply that his last relationship was back in university. The matchmaking attempt was already in motion. The colleague who had just questioned him was told by a friend that she had found him attractive during lunch. Her friend encouraged her to suggest a casual date, just to see if they were compatible. He immediately sensed the purpose of their gathering. Before she could even properly ask, he gently preempted her, apologizing and explaining that he wasn't looking for romance at the moment. He added that there were likely many people better for her than him, prompting a sad but understanding look from her. Walking home alone through the city night, he felt that the entire social interaction had been like lying on a bed of needles. He much preferred being alone. His only plan was to buy something from the convenience store and return to his solitude. As he crossed the street, his thoughts were cut short by the glare of headlights. In that final instant, a strange thought surfaced. He was glad he had rejected the girl earlier. Then, his life came to an abrupt and violent end. But it was not the end. He was reincarnated into the body of a baby. As he lay in a lavish crib, he wondered if this was some divine punishment. His musings were interrupted when a maid entered the large, opulent room, announcing it was time for Lord Zex to have his milk. As the bottle approached, he was struck by the dissonance of his new reality. The maid's attire and the Western-style interior were confusing, yet she spoke perfect Japanese. He concluded he must be in Japan, cursing his luck at having drawn the short stick in the lottery of rebirth. He then noticed a second woman. The first maid impatiently told him to hurry and finish the bottle, calling him a dense child. He processed the new information. He had 2 caretakers, and neither of them was his mother. Lying helpless, he listened as the 2 maids discussed him. One called him a pitiful child. The other remarked on his white hair, wondering if it was colorless, and commented on how unsettling it was that he never cried or laughed. Through their detached chatter, he learned of his own appearance. Though his body was that of an infant, his mind remained that of a 27-year-old adult. A chilling memory surfaced, a historical account of an experiment where babies deprived of affection all died before their first year. The thought lingered as he lay alone in the grand, empty room. He resolved that it was better this way, to not get deeply involved with anyone. He did not want to experience the pain of having someone close to him, like his family from his past life, erased for a second time. From the very start, he would not form a close relationship with anyone. That was his firm belief, at least. But then, a maid appeared at his crib, presenting another infant. She announced that this beautiful baby was his new sister. The thought struck him with disbelief. A sister? He had just decided he no longer wished to experience the loss of another. His shock gave way to a new reality as time passed. Both he and his sister, Caroline, grew into toddlers. One day, their parents appeared. His mother doted on Caroline, calling her incredibly cute, while his father formally noted that Zex had grown a bit. Zex was stunned, realizing these were his parents, though he privately thought his sister was much cuter. His mother's praise, however, seemed to have the opposite effect on Caroline, who began to cry with startling volume. The piercing wail filled the room. The sound was overwhelming, leaving him momentarily stunned as his parents and the source of the noise departed, leaving him alone in the suddenly quiet room. He then noticed the caretakers turning to leave. In a panic, he rushed to the door, pounding on it with his small fists. He shouted at them, questioning how they could just leave a baby alone in this state. His pleas went unheeded. Outside the door, the maid and butler conferred. One noted that it wasn't time for a diaper change, and the other confirmed that both Lord Zex and Lady Caroline had just been fed. Concluding there was nothing to be done, they decided to leave them alone. Overhearing their callous dismissal, Zex silently raged, demanding they do their jobs. But they were gone. He turned back to the room, where his sister continued to cry amidst a floor scattered with toys. He briefly considered the situation, concluding that it wasn't his problem. He let out a sigh of resignation. His gaze then fell upon a single object among the clutter, a baby rattle. With the rattle in hand, he approached his sister's crib. As she continued to weep, he extended the toy towards her, simply stating here. Her crying stopped, her wide eyes fixed on the offering. He held a milk bottle out towards his wailing sister, Caroline. The maid, surprised by his apparent concern, asks if he wants to hold it for her. But his patience quickly evaporates. With a frustrated cry, he tosses the bottle into the crib, deciding this is no longer his problem, and that she can just keep crying by herself. Back in his own crib, he tries to distract himself, but the sound of her continued crying grates on him. He glances at the clock, and a thought strikes him. It's well past the time she should have had her milk. Despite his efforts to ignore the situation, repeating to himself that it's not his problem, the realization clearly bothers him. Unable to ignore it any longer, he gets out of his crib and toddles over to the door, knocking repeatedly to get someone's attention. A nearby maid misinterprets his actions, remarking that Lord Zex is just playing by knocking on the door again and questioning why he doesn't use the toys provided. Zex listens, his expression hardening as he understands the truth. They are deliberately ignoring him. Caroline tumbles from a high surface, letting out a cry as she falls. Below, Zex watches in horror, his small body unable to reach her. He can only curse his own powerlessness as she plummets towards the floor. Just as disaster seems imminent, a maid rushes into the room, catching Caroline in the nick of time. Announcing she's brought milk, the maid holds the infant, who immediately clamors for it. Zex, now on the floor, looks on with a mixture of relief and immense frustration at the chaotic situation. The maid informs Zex that she has finished feeding his sister and will be taking her leave. She departs, leaving Caroline contentedly drinking from a bottle in her crib. The quiet does not last. A sudden wail from the crib startles Zex, who instantly realizes the next problem that needs solving: diapers. Having attended to the matter, Zex looks over a much happier Caroline. With a full belly and a clean diaper, she coos contentedly from her crib. His older brother, Karen, quietly observes the scene. Caught in the act of being helpful, Zex becomes flustered and defensive. He loudly proclaims that he only helped because Caroline was being noisy and annoying, insisting that this is a one-time occurrence. Despite his declaration, Zex finds himself trying to sing Caroline to sleep, questioning his own nonsensical lyrics about a child in the mountains. When he realizes the maid isn't coming back to handle the next issue, he sighs in resignation, deciding he'll change her diapers himself. Once again telling himself it's just this once. He continues his improvised lullaby, singing about a radish and a carrot. The bizarre song seems to work, as Caroline finally drifts off into a peaceful sleep. Some time has passed. Caroline is now old enough to sit up straight on her own. As she plays with a set of wooden blocks, Zex looks on, praising her for the milestone. "That's amazing, Caroline," he says. In response to his praise, Caroline looks up at him with wide, happy eyes and holds up one of the blocks, letting out a cheerful ah. She gurgled happily, reaching for the book her brother offered. Zex, however, seemed less than enthused, muttering a dry thanks as he handed it over. Her happiness was short-lived. She began to wail, clearly displeased. Zex immediately understood his error. This wasn't what she wanted. He internally fumed, realizing that in a room filled only with children's toys and picture books, looking after his sister had become his sole source of stimulation. His frustration mounted. Shit, he thought, glancing towards his bed. He wondered just how many times they would have to repeat this routine before Caroline was finally content. A wave of heat washed over him, and he slumped into his bed. A chilling realization dawned. He had a fever, likely something contagious. His gaze shifted to Caroline's nearby crib, a new worry taking hold. He had to be careful not to pass the illness onto her. Driven by this concern, he sought out the household staff. Standing before Sinas and a maid, he explained the situation with uncharacteristic clarity, stating he had a fever and would pass it to Caroline if they remained in the same room. The butler, however, was firm, stating he could not permit a room change without the Lord's permission, but would request a doctor. His patience wore thin. "Hurry up," he urged, his voice sharp. If a full room change was impossible, he demanded they at least move his bed as far from Caroline as they could. "You can at least do that, right?" he pressed. His outburst left an impression. Later, while the staff were away, the maid remarked to Sinas, "Hey, didn't Lord Zex speak exactly like an adult earlier?" Sinas agreed, finding it disturbing and speculating that the 1-year-old might be possessed. Unseen in the doorway, Zex overheard their entire conversation. He retreated to his bed, the weight of their words pressing down on him. He had made a mistake. In his desperation, he had stopped acting like a child, and now the staff was suspicious. But the regret was soon overwhelmed by the fever's grip. His head throbbed. His whole body ached. A distant memory surfaced. The last time he had felt this sick was during his childhood in his previous life. The memory sharpened, bringing forth an image from that past life. He was a young man, sick in bed, and his little sister, Nanami, was there, watching over him. He recalled with a pang of nostalgia that whenever he was ill, she had never left his side. He drifts in a feverish haze, a dark void punctuated by stars. A child's silhouette appears as a desperate cry echoes around him. He wonders if it is Nanami or someone else entirely. The sound pulls him from the dreamscape, and he finds himself back in his crib. He realizes the crying is real and coming from just outside his door. Panicked, he tries to warn the visitor away, remembering his illness could be contagious, and they must not come any closer. His infant voice struggles to form the words, but his desperation is clear as he reaches out, tears welling in his eyes. He calls out for his brother, Ni, hoping to be understood. But it is not his brother who answers. At the doorway stands Caroline, her face scrunched in a cry as she calls out for him. The realization strikes Zex. She is calling for him. It is the first time she has ever referred to him as her brother, even though he only ever looked after her out of a sense of obligation. Before he can process it fully, she begins to clamber over the railing of his crib. A silent no screams in his mind as he reaches out, trying desperately to stop her from entering his contaminated space. She tumbles into the crib and immediately wraps her arms around him. Zex is taken aback by the sudden embrace, but a wave of relief washes over him as he sees she is unharmed. He calls her name, but as he does, his strength gives out. He feels his body failing him. He slumps forward, unconscious. Caroline pulls back, looking down at his still form with a puzzled expression, calling out Ni, as if to wake him. Receiving no response, she simply snuggles up against his side, her concern replaced by a sense of comfort as she drifts off to sleep beside him. Sometime later, as sunlight streams through the window, a pair of small feet touch down firmly on the floor beside the crib. It is Zex. He stands, bewildered, realizing his fever has completely vanished and his body feels healthy again. The sudden recovery startles him, making him question if he had lost consciousness. His eyes immediately dart toward the bed, his first thought being for Caroline, who is sleeping soundly. He awakens to find Caroline still beside him and greets her. A thought crosses his mind. Could she have stayed by his side out of worry? He immediately dismisses the notion, reminding himself that she is merely an 8-month-old infant. Just as he dismisses the idea, Caroline beams at him, reaching out with a joyful cry of Ni. The unexpected word, a clear term for brother, leaves him stunned. He wonders if it was just his imagination, a fleeting hope from a man who had decided to never let anyone into his world again. Faced with this pure, undeniable affection, he realizes with certainty that there is no way to stop this connection from forming. He accepts it. He pulls her into an embrace, fully accepting his new reality. He is her older brother, and she is his precious sister. Outside the window, snow begins to fall, marking a quiet, pivotal moment. Some time has passed. A now older Karen stands before a vast library, asking a slightly older Caroline what story she would like to read today. She hums in thought, considering the options. Caroline excitedly points to a large tome titled The Legend of the Holy Empire, asking for this. Karen, seeing her choice, agrees to read it and tells her to take a seat. As Karen reads aloud, the story tells of the Demon King's arrival at the frontier. Just when all hope seemed lost, a voice cried out, "We won't lose." The people turn to see two figures, the young hero Zioni and the saintess Kisaragi. He finishes the passage and remarks that it's a rather standard fairy tale. Caroline looks up at him inquisitively, prompting him to quickly dismiss his comment as nothing. Caroline's gaze returns to the book, her finger tracing the names. Hero Zion, Saintess Kizura, she murmurs, before looking up as if asking a question, catching Karen by surprise. The names echo in Zex's mind, triggering a horrifying realization. Karen, Caroline Flamarel ui seri foranada. Golden hair, scarlet eyes. The pieces click into place. This world is the same world as the game from his past life. And this girl, his sister, is a character from that game. He recalls the frustration of his past life, sitting before a screen late at night. He had failed again, lamenting how he could lose to a character he disdained as a gutter rat. The option he chose had clearly failed. He had analyzed the game's mechanics, realizing that his current approach was also wrong. He theorized that if the main capture target was close to Caroline, the number of strategic routes would increase, making a survival route for her the most likely possibility. His thoughts were interrupted by his younger sister, Nanami, appearing at the doorway. She asked why he was still awake, and he replied that he'd woken up thirsty. Seeing his intense focus, she commented that there must be a single, perfect path he was searching for. She remarked on the sheer amount of time he dedicated to the game, asking if he truly enjoyed it that much. After a brief acknowledgement from him, she urged him to stop staring at the screen and get some sleep before bidding him goodnight. Her words lingered in his mind. He had a selfish desire to keep Nanami by his side, a wish that he now projected onto the game. He realized his obsession with finding a survival route for the character Caroline stemmed from what his sister had said. But in the game he knew, such a route never existed. In every playthrough, death inevitably came for the girl, Caroline, just as it had come for his own sister in reality. The memory of the game's tragic outcome was stark and brutal. The horrifying parallel between the game's tragedy and his own life's loss crashes down on him. He recoils in his infant body, a silent scream of "not again" echoing in his mind. The truth solidifies. This child, his new sister, is the villainess fated to die. As this devastating realization hits him, his gaze falls upon his siblings. He sees Caroline, the supposed villainess, lean in and plant a soft, affectionate kiss on their brother Karen's cheek. The kiss was meant to soothe Karen, who was crying. With a worried expression, Caroline gently pats his head, trying to comfort him by murmuring for the pain to go away. Wiping away her own sympathetic tears, Caroline reassures a still sniffling Karen that she's all right and that his presence makes her happy again. Seeing their bond, Zex's despair shifts to determination. He understands that this is merely the beginning. He still has many paths to explore and resolves to take action himself. He makes a silent vow. He will definitely protect Karen. His thoughts, however, now turn to his other sibling. While the image of his sister Caroline, crying out before a grim, skeletal monarch on a throne of despair, filled his mind's eye, his internal vow was for another. He would change Karen's fate. As his siblings Caroline and Karen draw quietly nearby, the infant Zex internally summarizes his extraordinary circumstances. He has been reincarnated into the world of an action RPG dating game he once played, The Tale of the Brave Saint, as a background character who is also Caroline's older brother. He recalls the game's structure, which is split into 3 parts. The first part takes place at an academy. The second is an adventure to reseal a released demon lord, and the third consists of individual romantic routes with various characters. The academy setting, however, is the primary stage for the story. This choice of game changes depending on the player's selected gender, becoming the hero if male or the saint if female. His thoughts then fixate on Caroline, who only appears in the game if the player chooses to be the female saint. He remembers her as the complete opposite of the pure and innocent saint. She is selfish, arrogant, and incredibly jealous from their very first encounter. Her jealousy only intensifies as more people, including the romantic interests, flock to the saint, improving the saint's reputation. This growing admiration from others causes Caroline to begin actively interfering with and tormenting the saint. This path of envy leads to a terrible end. Unable to bear the saint's success, Caroline joins forces with demons in an attempt to kill her, but ultimately dies as a result of her own malevolent actions. But that dark future is a stark contrast to the present. The toddler Caroline, full of innocent pride, presents a chaotic scribble to her brother Karen, affectionately calling him Ian. He looks at the drawing, momentarily confused. He, however, quickly praises her work as amazing and gives her an affectionate pat on the head as she requested. Beaming with joy, Caroline closes her eyes and thanks him. She, basking in the praise, happily asks Karen to draw more for her. This display of pure childhood innocence prompts a thought in Zex's mind. Something must be done to avoid her tragic death. The interaction sparks a realization in Karen. Standing alone with his arms crossed, he considers that if he raises Caroline properly, she won't grow up to be so arrogant. If that happens, she won't become the saint's enemy and won't fall for the demon's temptation. His expression hardens with newfound resolve. As he walks purposefully down the hall, his determined air catches the attention of two maids, who watch him pass with expressions of surprise. He hops down the grand staircase, his mind set on his new goal. Meanwhile, Zex, still in his infant body, contemplates the information from the game. The reason Caroline becomes a villainess is because she receives no love from her parents, and even the servants treat her coldly. At least, that's how the story goes. The weight of this task suddenly hits him. He has to make their parents love her, but he barely remembers them, having only seen them once. He groans in frustration, thinking it's impossible. Just then, the butler, Senes, informs him that the master and mistress have arrived. Karen realizes that if he wants to change things, he must approach them himself. His frustration boils over into a shout directed at the sprawling mansion. He can't believe they would just abandon their children in a separate building. It's been 3 whole months since he asked the butler to send a message. As he fumes, Caroline tugs on his clothes, urgently needing to use the restroom. Her insistent pulling and squirming finally break through his anger. He turns, his face a mask of shock at her sudden and desperate plea. At that very moment, the large front doors swing open. Just in time, Caroline exclaims with relief. From the landing above, Zex watches as a servant's voice rings out, announcing the arrival of the master and mistress. Their elegantly dressed father and mother step into the foyer, flanked by attendants. Looking down from the second-floor balcony, Karen and Caroline watch them enter, and Karen calls out to them with hopeful excitement. Their father glances up, but his expression is cold and distant. He ignores Karen's greeting entirely, instead directing a sharp order at Zex to get down from the railing. The blatant dismissal leaves Karen crestfallen. They're ignoring him. As Senes approaches to offer tea, Karen quickly turns to a confused Caroline, trying to spare her feelings by claiming their parents just didn't notice them. Zex observes this, realizing with pity that his brother doesn't even comprehend the full extent of their parents' neglect. Later, Karen sits with Caroline, using a pair of stuffed rabbits to illustrate a concept she doesn't understand. He holds up one, explaining that this is the mother rabbit giving her little rabbit child a hug full of love. He then picks up another toy, identifying it as the rabbit dad. He gently explains that a father and a mother are people who love you, hug you, and stay by your side to protect you. He sat across from his younger sister in the vast, empty room and asked if she understood his lesson. Caroline, seated on a cushion, gave a simple, affirmative reply. In response, Caroline joyfully held up the rabbit toys, declaring Karen to be her Ni-and-I mother-father, all in one. As Karen took in her words with a warm, flustered smile, Zex, who had been observing from the doorway, announced his need to use the restroom and called out to his brother. He slipped out of the room, his mind already turning to the future of their territory. But he quickly refocused his priorities, deciding that first, he needed to properly check on Karen and the situation unfolding between the siblings. Meanwhile, in another part of the manor, the children's parents were with Senes. Their mother questioned why the children were outside their rooms. Their father, however, dismissed the matter as a nuisance, declaring he wouldn't deal with it. He delegated the task to Senes, who accepted with an assurance that he would handle it splendidly. From the hallway, Zex overheard his father's cold command to Senes. Just feed the children some story and deal with them himself. Unaware of this, Caroline approached Karen with a book, asking him to read. She then pointed towards the door where their parents had been, once again calling him Ni-and-I mother-father. With a gentle smile, Karen corrected her, stating that he was simply her Ni-and-I. He readily agreed, and the two settled onto a bed to read together. As they looked at the book, Karen made a silent vow. He might just be her older brother, but he would do his best to love her as much as any normal parent would. And so he did. He was there to hold her as she slept, to share meals with her at the table, and to help her stretch and get ready for a new day, stepping fully into the role of her primary caregiver. Their day took them to the estate's garden, where Caroline's attention was captured by a shimmering insect. Ni-and-I, what's that? She asked, pointing at its pretty glow. Karen explained that it was a magic light butterfly, and that it was drawn there because the gardener took such good care of the flowers. Just then, the gardener himself appeared, turning in surprise to greet Zex, who had also come into the garden. Startled by the man's sudden appearance, Caroline quickly hid behind her brother. Zex, observing the scene, pointed towards the man and said to Karen, "Look, Karen, that's the gardener." He watched as Caroline cheerfully thanked the gardener for the flowers. Seeing his older brother, Karen, now overflowing with affection for their sister, Zex felt a sense of relief, believing that with this love, Caroline was no longer fated to die. This relief, however, was fleeting. He reminded himself that this world was so similar to the game, a grim vision of Caroline's potential tragic fate flashing through his mind. He reasoned that since she was still only 2 years old, her personality could change drastically, and he could not let his guard down. As this thought solidified his resolve, Caroline's joyful voice cut through the air. She called out to Karen, delighted by the butterflies fluttering around her, calling them her friends. Watching her, Zex made a silent vow. He would do anything to protect his little sister. This vow sparked a realization. To change the outcome of anything that might happen, he needed to get stronger. While he contemplated this, Caroline happily showed a butterfly to Karen, who eagerly shared in her delight. Determined, he quietly slipped away. Later, back in his room, the young boy climbed out of his crib, his mind set on his new goal. He began his training immediately, starting with running and calisthenics. He resolved to train in a way that was suitable for his young body and learn how to fight. He recalled hearing that it was not good for children to build too much muscle, so he focused on basic conditioning. His run took him across the estate grounds and towards the kitchen building. Inside, the kitchen staff were busy with their duties. He entered the kitchen, where the head chef noticed his presence. Zex's attention, however, was captured by the chef effortlessly conjuring a small fireball to light a stove. He realized this was just like the game, and that he should practice magic. A key principle of this world came to mind. One's magical attribute is reflected in their hair and eye color, which explained the chef's fire magic. Curious, he decided to test this theory. He hesitantly asked for some water. The chef, puzzled by the simple request, turned to a nearby maid to fulfill it. The maid obliged, but not in the way he expected. She effortlessly created a water ball with magic. The chef observed Zex's awe, remarking on the pity of a noble being colorless. The truth dawned on Zex. His white hair meant he had no attribute. He understood that while everyone is born with mana, they need an attribute to create magic. He, being colorless, was one of the few who could not. His discovery was not a private one. In the kitchens, the household staff were already whispering, lamenting how bad it was for the house to have a colorless heir. They consoled themselves with the thought that the young lady, with her blonde hair, would surely inherit light magic instead. He listened from around a corner as their gossip continued. The colorless, they said, were failures from the moment of their birth. One maid noted that while Karen had been treated better lately, the same could not be said for Zex, the colorless brother. Elsewhere, Caroline's eyes drooped with sleep, her head tilting as she held a stuffed rabbit. A voice from off-panel offered a piece of wisdom, stating that not having an attribute doesn't mean one is completely useless. Her older brother, Karen, noticed her fatigue. He gently addressed her, suggesting they take a nap. Caroline, looking up at him with tired eyes, quietly agreed. But Zex had no time for rest. Alone in his room, sitting upright on his large bed, a new resolve hardened within him. He had decided on a course of action. Outside, he began his training, attempting a technique known as physical boost. As the name implies, it is a method to strengthen parts of the body by channeling mana through them. He focused, recalling what he knew from a game. Physical boost was a universal skill, something anyone could use, even those without an attribute. This was why he chose to master it, to teach himself how to handle mana. He knew that the inherent magic of the colorless had not yet been discovered, leaving him unable to use conventional spells. His attempt backfired violently. With a cry of pain, he watched as uncontrolled mana erupted from his hand in a dark, viscous splatter. He stared at the injury, realizing the grim truth of the technique. Even a minor mistake in controlling the output would result in hurting himself. The implication was horrifying. He imagined messing up while trying to strengthen the defense around his head. It was no wonder nobody would dare use such a dangerous skill. But despite the risk, he clenched his injured hand into a determined fist. This was his only choice. He believed it was the only way he could protect Karen. In her grand bedroom, Caroline stirs, sitting up in bed. She calls out sleepily for her brother, looking around the empty room and wondering where he could be. Her search leads her to Zex, and she wraps her arms around him from behind in a sudden, tight hug, exclaiming that she's found him. From the doorway, their older brother Karen peeks in. Zex, caught off guard, apologizes to Karen and asks Caroline if she just woke up. Her attention is then drawn to his hand. With wide, worried eyes, she points out his injury. Zex, sweating nervously, attempts to downplay it, explaining that he was simply practicing magic. The sight of the bandage brings tears to Caroline's eyes, and she lets out a startled cry. Trying to soothe her, Zex quickly waves his wrapped hand and apologizes for scaring her, assuring her that it's hidden now. He realizes with a pang of guilt that he has frightened her. He must be more careful. He needs to make sure Karen doesn't find him when he's practicing his dangerous techniques. To change the subject and calm her down, he offers to read a book to her. Moments later, the two are sitting together, engrossed in a large book. Zex reads the story aloud to his sister, narrating the words of the elder of the forest. You need to bring me 3 things if you want me to grant your wish. While reading with his sister, Zex is consumed by a troubling thought. He wonders how the game's protagonist could know so much about the future tragedy. He himself is a reincarnator, yet there's a vast difference in their knowledge. As he puzzles over this disparity, Caroline calls out to him, trying to get his attention. Her gentle call escalates into a shout. "Ni-and-I." The sudden noise finally breaks through his concentration. Startled, Caroline apologizes and asks where they had left off in their reading. He turns his head away, a flicker of annoyance on his face as he is pulled from his deep thoughts. Later, during a study session with Karen, Zex remains completely disengaged. While his older brother writes diligently, Zex stares blankly into his book, his mind still wrestling with his earlier concerns. That night, as Caroline sleeps peacefully beside him, Zex lies awake, staring at the canopy above. A sudden realization seems to dawn on him. The next morning, Caroline awakens to an empty space beside her. She gets out of bed and begins to search, her calls for Nii echoing through the mansion's corridors and from an upper balcony. Her frantic search leads her outside into the gardens, still dressed in her nightgown. As she calls out for her brother, the estate's gardener spots the young lady and calls out her name in surprise. The gardener approaches, gently telling her she shouldn't be wandering alone and offering to escort her back to the mansion. Filled with worry, Caroline asks where her brother is. The gardener can only reply that he has not seen Zex. Returning to her room, Caroline stands alone, the large chamber feeling vast and empty without her brother's presence. Meanwhile, far from the house, Zex is training. As if hearing his sister's distant calls, he whispers his brother's nickname, Nii. He then focuses his will, activating a skill, physical enhancement. With a surge of newfound power, he clenches his fist and shatters a thick wooden log. He pushes his limits, realizing he can now nearly double his strength with mana control and might soon be able to crush stone. As he contemplates this, he is interrupted by a shout. From the bushes, his sister Caroline calls out, not for him, but for their brother, Karen. Startled, he turns to find Caroline standing nearby. He asks when she arrived and if she had been watching him. She doesn't answer his question. Instead, her face clouds over with fear as she stares at him, her voice a whisper as she mutters, hate, magic. Her fear gives way to tears. She begins to cry, whimpering that she wants Karen. Zex looks on, shocked and stricken with guilt at her reaction. With tears streaming down her face, she pleads, want Nia and I to stay. Her desperate plea shatters his resolve. He internally chastises himself, wondering what he was doing putting on airs about protecting her. He realizes he should have known what she truly needed. He had told himself his training was for Karen's sake, but now sees he only managed to hurt Karen, her own strange name for herself, and make her cry, defeating his entire purpose. Overcome with regret, he kneels and pulls her into a hug, apologizing. He tells her it might sound like an excuse, but he loves her more than anything, and that will never change. As he makes his promise, she looks up, wiping a tear from her eye, and asks if he really means it. His words have an immediate effect. Caroline's face breaks into a wide, joyful, tear-streaked smile, and she lets out a happy giggle. Zex watches her, relieved. A short while later, the two walk hand in hand back toward the estate. Caroline calls him Nii to get his attention, asking him to listen. She then asks if he is sure about his training, voicing her concern that magic and getting hurt are scary. Before he can respond, she offers her own reassurance, speaking of herself in the third person. Karen is sure. Karen is with Nii. He decides to turn this moment into a lesson, offering to teach Caroline magic. Her immediate reaction is not excitement, but fear for his safety, pleading for him not to get hurt. He is touched, realizing her earlier tears were born from a deep-seated worry for him. To begin her training, Zex starts with the basics, ball magic. He confirms that her attribute is fire, a fact he already knew. With a determined, okay, Caroline focuses her concentration, hands outstretched. As she does, Zex notes a crucial detail. She possesses not one, but two attributes, light and fire. This realization sends Zex into deep thought. He recalls that light magic is exceedingly rare, and unlike other elements, simply having the aptitude is not enough to wield it. In the game, he remembers, Caroline, in her role as the villainess, could never use light magic despite having the potential. The rumored requirement was a vague one. The user had to truly cherish someone in their heart. His mind flashes back to her recent, heartfelt declaration of support, calling him Nii-sensei. He had been so moved by her simple affection. A new thought strikes him. If cherishing someone is truly the condition, then Caroline, who so clearly loves her brother, should now be more than capable of using the saint's magic. The implications of this are terrifying. He realizes that if she can wield light magic, she will become a target for the royal family and other powerful factions. He cannot allow her to be put in such danger. As this protective resolve solidifies, Caroline cries out in triumph. Nii, I did it. He looks over to see that she has successfully conjured a magical orb, but it is not of pure light. It is a swirling, dark flame. Time passes. Zex reflects that though the future was uncertain, both he and Caroline grew well. They are seen as slightly older children, sitting closely together and sharing a book, a brief moment of peaceful, scholarly siblinghood. In this new chapter of their lives, Caroline's power has grown. She now effortlessly conjures two orbs of her unique dark fire. Watching her, Zex is filled with a familiar anxiety, wondering if his own strength will be enough to protect her from the path she now walks. Their moment is interrupted by the arrival of a new caretaker. A maid with a severe expression introduces herself as Cheyenne Shahilachroma, announcing she will be looking after them. As she offers a polite greeting, a single, chilling thought solidifies in Zex's mind. She is a spy. A young woman in a maid's uniform, Cheyenne, stands within a grand estate, steeling herself for her first mission. Her client is the Holy Royal Family, and she understands the honor in fulfilling her duty, even if she considers her target a troublesome outcast. She formally introduces herself to the 2 children she will be attending. "I'm Cheyenne," she states with a slight bow, as Caroline clings to her brother, Karen. "Starting today, I will be responsible for taking care of the 2 of you." She concludes with a polite, "Nice to meet you." As she stands there, her stomach lets out an embarrassing growl. Thinking quickly, she remarks that the room seems a bit warm and offers to open a window, creating an excuse to move. The hunger pang strikes with force, causing her to double over with a sharp grunt of pain. Having composed herself, she turns to Caroline. "I will wait outside in the hallway," she informs the girl. "Please call for me if you need anything." From the doorway, Cheyenne watches as Caroline once again embraces Karen. Her focus is sharp. She identifies her target, Caroline Flammel Zarif Orinata. Her true purpose surfaces in her thoughts. Her mission is to monitor Caroline closely and, at the very first sign of awakening light magic, report it to her homeland immediately. As she contemplates this, a faint, ethereal aura seems to shimmer around the unsuspecting girl. Later, Zex joins his siblings. Cheyenne asks if they require anything, and Karen announces he's going to the restroom. Cheyenne begins to follow, stating it's her job, but Caroline stops her, insisting she doesn't need to come with them. Cheyenne pauses, acknowledging the dismissal. She then corrects Caroline's etiquette, reminding her to address Zex as Oni-sama. Caroline completely ignores the instruction, distracted by a butterfly. "Oni-sama, look," she exclaims to Karen, pointing. "A butterfly." Cheyenne lets out a frustrated huff. Confused, Caroline turns to Karen and repeats the word, "Oni-sama." He smiles warmly and encourages her. "Yeah, call me Oni-sama." He explains that it's about time she started her etiquette training. She giggles with delight as her older brother, Karen, pulls her into a warm embrace. Observing from a distance, the new maid, Cheyenne, notes that their closeness is unusual for noble siblings. While this proximity is convenient for her constant watch over Caroline, she finds the expansion of her role from mere surveillance to direct service somewhat concerning. Her concern stems from the nature of her mission, which requires a certain level of subterfuge. Out in the gardens, a shimmering light emanates from her hand as she employs a magical disguise to conceal her activities. Meanwhile, inside the manor, Karen stands by a large window with a pensive expression. On a nearby table, the afternoon tea is ready, featuring a plate of delicate rose-shaped cookies. As Cheyenne serves the family, Caroline asks her older brother if the roses for the treats came from their garden. Cheyenne pours the tea, remarking that she would be happy if they were. Internally, however, she thinks that Caroline should phrase her questions more assertively. Before she can continue, Karen politely intervenes, telling Cheyenne that he will handle it and that she may step back. With a firm expression, Cheyenne insists that serving them is part of her job and continues to pour. She finishes and places the teacup before him, apologizing for the wait. Later, Cheyenne brings the used dishes to the kitchen. Another maid offers to wash them, and Cheyenne gratefully accepts. Her task complete for the moment, she decides she should also investigate how the other servants view Lady Caroline. Her colleague immediately questions her, asking what made her want to work there. The maid explains that everyone knows the house is doomed to fall because the next head of the family is colorless. She muses that only a weirdo or someone with baggage would willingly come. Cheyenne crosses her arms, asking what she means, stating that her own background is perfectly clear and she was hired through a proper introduction. The other maid clarifies that this is precisely the point. It's odd for someone with a clean record to join them. She then praises Caroline, noting how she adores her colorless brother and treats the servants with kindness. Because of this, the maid concludes, Caroline has a bright future ahead of her. Hearing this praise, the maid suggests making rose candies for Caroline next time. She then warns Cheyenne to be careful, as going overboard might attract the young master's attention. This information clicks for Cheyenne. She realizes that Caroline might become the next saint and considers stocking up on related supplies. She watches another maid finish washing the dishes with incredible speed, noting her efficiency. The other servant offers to put the items away, and Cheyenne confirms that the task is complete. Just then, a knock sounds at a nearby door, and a voice announces that dinner has been brought. The door opens to the dining room, where Karen has arrived with the meal. He tells Cheyenne that he will handle it. At the table, Caroline excitedly holds up her bib for her brother. When Cheyenne moves to assist, offering to help Caroline with her meal, the young girl firmly refuses, declaring that she can eat by herself. Caroline proudly repeats her declaration of independence. Her brother Karen beams, praising her and calling her amazing. Cheyenne observes the interaction with a neutral, unreadable expression. Later, Cheyenne announces that it is time for Lady Caroline to get dressed, but the girl dashes past her. Entering the room, Cheyenne presents a change of clothes she has brought. Karen once again steps in, stating that he will dress himself. He looks directly at Cheyenne and explains that he takes care of his sister because he wants to and would appreciate it if she did not interfere. After a moment of silent assessment, Cheyenne simply agrees. Her duties concluded for the evening. The maid Cheyenne bids a quiet goodnight to the room of Zex and Caroline. With a soft click, she closes the door, her footsteps tapping rhythmically as she walks away down the polished wooden floor. As she proceeds down the long, empty corridor of the estate, she finds herself wondering just how long the newest maid assigned to the young master will manage to last. She recalls the previous one, thinking her awful. That girl couldn't endure it, quitting almost immediately because she felt the young master wasn't even human. Meanwhile, in their quarters, two other maids gossip while preparing for bed. One confides that she finds the young master creepy, mentioning that he isn't just strange. She heard he yelled at the steward like a full-grown adult when he was barely a toddler. The other agrees, adding that she once saw him muttering to himself in an empty hallway. They worry he might be possessed and question if he should even be allowed near the young lady. The door to their room clicks open, revealing Cheyenne. One of the maids greets her, noting she's done with her shift. The other continues her complaint, griping that whenever they try to dote on Lady Caroline, the young master always butts in, and it's not as if they're paid extra for dealing with him. Her companion agrees, musing that being the young master's maid must be easy. She reasons that since he does everything himself, his maid must have tons of free time, which she declares isn't fair since the housemaids are constantly busy. The maids eagerly concur, one suggesting they should get on Lady Caroline's good side for job security. The other laments that it would be nice to pass some of their workload her way. Cheyenne listens to their chatter in silence as they decide to get some sleep and bid each other goodnight. Cheyenne internally dismisses their words. She wasn't jealous of the little sister. Her gaze in that moment hadn't been filled with envy. No, she was calmly evaluating whether Zex was useful to her and to Karen. She scoffs at the thought of the other two. No, their petty feelings were irrelevant. Her expression hardens with resolve as she begins to undo the ribbon of her uniform. Alone in her room, she sits on the edge of her bed and reaffirms her objective. There's no need to get emotional or sentimental. If she wants to get close to Lady Caroline, she will have to stay wary of Zex. A harrowing memory surfaces. A small girl, Caroline, collapses, panting on the ground as insults echo around her. Filthy child, nuisance, useless girl. She reaches out a hand, her face a mask of desperation, as the cruel voice continues, questioning her very presence and calling her disgusting. Her desperate plea is aimed at her father. His words from that time resurface in her mind, explaining their family's precarious position. They were exiled after a political loss, and now owe their prosperity to the royal family of the Holy Kingdom. The memory becomes sharper, more painful. Her father's dark form looms over her, his hand gripping her head as he declares that her entire being, her eyes, ears, hair, body, and heart, must be offered to the royal family. He coldly states that even a failure like her must at least serve as a sacrificial pawn. This crushing weight culminates in a single, desperate thought. If she were to die for the family, would her father finally acknowledge her? The scene snaps back to the present day. In the children's bedroom, Cheyenne stands professionally while Karen and Caroline are still in their nightclothes. Zex watches, taken aback, as Cheyenne explains that looking after them is simply her job. He silently thinks she is being overly formal. Cheyenne then turns to Zex, questioning if he is seriously letting a servant perform a lady's duty. As she moves to dress Caroline, Zex sputters in protest, insisting he wants to be the one to help his sister. Before the argument can continue, Karen gently takes Caroline's hands. He tells her he's excited to see her grow into a fine lady and that he will be proud to have her as his little sister. Looking up at him, Caroline asks if her becoming a lady would truly make him happy. His gentle encouragement ignites a fire within her. Her eyes sparkle with new determination as she clenches her fists and declares that she will do her best. Watching from the side, Cheyenne understands, but quietly hopes the young lady doesn't push herself too hard. True to her word, Caroline immediately begins her training. Cheyenne assists, balancing a stack of books on the girl's head to improve her posture while she practices writing. Caroline wobbles, but remains steadfast, driven by her newfound purpose. Her training seems to have filled her with a new energy. She cheerfully challenges her brother Karen to a race to the playground, declaring that the first one there wins. Karen and Cheyenne look on as she dashes ahead. He turns to Cheyenne, thanking her and calling her Meg. He explains that he felt it was time to set some boundaries with Caroline, despite her being his sister, and admits he's never been good at understanding girls. He tells Cheyenne he'll be counting on her from now on. He offers a warm smile, and Cheyenne formally agrees, though she addresses him as Zexama. As the children's playful shouts fade into the distance, Caroline accusing Karen of cheating in their race, Cheyenne watches them go. She silently wonders to herself if she has managed to earn his trust. She reflects on her current position, acknowledging the part she is playing, the loyal servant to a noble family. A strange feeling begins to stir within her. It is a surprisingly potent feeling, and her expression grows serious as she processes this internal shift. Sometime later, with winter having settled over the estate, Caroline spots something in the snow-dusted garden. Dressed warmly in a new coat, she excitedly calls out to Karen, pointing at a small, pure white bunny she finds adorable. Her delight turns to alarm as a much larger rabbit suddenly lunges at the smaller creature. Reacting instantly, Cheyenne sprints forward, shouting for the aggressor to stop. Unaware of the immediate danger, Caroline kneels, gently trying to coax the little bunny toward her. The danger averted, Caroline now cuddles the rescued bunny, marveling at how fluffy it is. She excitedly notes that its red eyes are just like hers, but Karen gently corrects her, pointing out that the bunny's eyes are red, just like his. Nearby, Cheyenne observes the family moment with a cold, distant expression. In the quiet of the evening, Cheyenne pens a periodic report. She notes no progress regarding the subject's magic abilities, deciding it is better not to include uncertain variables. She considers this prudence, not concealment, though she recalls a faint trace of light magic that had appeared and then quickly subsided. In a sunnier scene, Caroline joyfully counts flowers in the garden under Karen's tutelage, miscounting slightly. Karen smiles, pleased that she remembers the lesson he taught her the previous day. He continues his instruction, explaining that while many say magic is all about feeling, he believes one cannot cast it properly without truly understanding how it works. From a nearby doorway, Cheyenne watches the siblings' interaction. Watching them, Cheyenne reflects on Karen's dedication. She finds it remarkable that he is so devoted to teaching his sister, especially since he cannot sense magic himself. She concludes that he must truly treasure Caroline. Inspired by her brother's words, Caroline concentrates with all her might, her small body trembling with effort. Cheyenne observes her, noting that for a child, her focus is almost unnervingly intense. A sudden, brilliant flash erupts between Caroline's hands. Her eyes widen in astonishment as a small, radiant orb of light materializes before her. She runs to Karen, excitedly shouting for him to look at what she created. From the shadows of a doorway, Cheyenne recognizes it instantly. A light orb, a form of light magic. The realization hits her hard. She knows she must report this, an act that will surely lead to Caroline being summoned to the palace and separated from her brother. Resigned, she accepts that it is her duty. Later, while Cheyenne is serving at the dinner table, Zex quietly calls her name. He asks to speak with her privately after Karen has gone to sleep. After seeing that Caroline is sleeping soundly in her bed, Cheyenne makes her way to the arranged meeting. She finds Zex waiting for her outside. He gets straight to the point, asking what she is up to. As he confronts her, Cheyenne feels a strange, unsettling sensation emanating from him, making her wonder about its source. He cuts straight to the heart of the matter, directly accusing Cheyenne of being a spy from the royal palace. The blunt accusation makes her flinch, her professional composure cracking for the first time. Her mind reels as she questions why she is so shaken. Seeing her lack of denial, he takes it as confirmation and presses his advantage, asking if she has reported Caroline's use of magic yet. With a sudden gesture, he unleashes a spell that shatters her disguise. Cheyenne cries out in shock as her hair lengthens and her pointed ears are revealed. He calmly identifies her as an elf and issues an ultimatum. If she refuses his request, he will make her identity public. He notes that the royal family hiring an elf, a supposed enemy, would spark outrage among the citizens. The weight of his threat settles upon her. She knows exposing her secret would throw the kingdom into chaos. He dismisses this, stating his only priority is Karen's safety. He then turns the accusation back on her, declaring that she is the one destabilizing the country, as she is the one who swore loyalty to the royal family. He presses for her decision, asking if she accepts his offer. Kneeling before the child, Cheyenne finds herself unable to refuse, her loyalty to the royal family forcing her hand. With a snap of her fingers, she signals her capitulation, agreeing to his command. Upon her acceptance, a strange energy whirls around her. She feels something wrapping around her form, questioning if it's just her imagination. He watches the magical effect take hold, remarking that a one-sided contract seems unfair. He then formalizes their agreement with a command. Standing over the kneeling elf, he orders her not to disclose any information about the Forna siblings without his express permission. With the contract established, he makes a declaration, stating that Forna will prioritize their agreement and keep her own secret. Bidding her good night, he expresses his anticipation for their future collaboration. Cheyenne, however, remains stunned, questioning her own emotional reaction and recalling her spy training to suppress such feelings. The encounter leaves her deeply unsettled. Standing alone in the garden, she contemplates the child who cast a form of contract magic she never encountered, a spell powerful enough to shatter her disguise. The mystery of his identity weighs heavily on her mind. For today's magic practice, Zex turns to his older brother and asks Karen if he can demonstrate his light magic. Nearby, Caroline seems surprised by the request, asking if her maid, Cheyenne, is permitted to stay and watch. Zex readily agrees. In response, Caroline apologizes, explaining that she cannot use her light magic yet, though she is training hard to master it someday. She confirms its ability to heal and purify curses. Zex acknowledges this, then informs her that, just as he has already told Karen, he will be counting on her help if the need arises. He makes her promise not to mention her light magic to anyone, and both she and Karen affectionately pat his head in agreement. Her expression shifts to one of deep concern. Caroline reminds Zex that he promised his magic would be a secret just between them. With a worried look, she explains her fear. If others find out, bad people might try to take her away, separating her from him. As she speaks, Cheyenne's gaze intensifies, her lips tightening. The fear lingers on Caroline's face as she stands silently, her shoulders slumped. Zex, observing her distress, turns to Karen with a troubled expression, questioning if he made the wrong decision by judging it was safe to share the information with Cheyenne. Sensing the tension, Cheyenne interjects with firm resolve, declaring that she has sworn an oath not to betray Zex. He looks at her, a small smile on his face, and affirms that he knows this, though he internally wonders if his earlier hesitation was petty. With that matter settled, he shifts the focus. Now it's my turn to ask. He begins questioning Cheyenne about what she was taught regarding being colorless. Caroline lets out a gasp of surprise. Cheyenne calmly explains that it is commonly seen as a useless trait, one without any unique magical properties. He simply smiles, dismissing the notion as merely society's perception. His casual acceptance does not sit well with Caroline, who becomes visibly upset. She whirls on Cheyenne, indignantly demanding how she could say such a thing to her older brother. Her eyes well up with frustrated tears. Zex gently takes her hand, urging her not to be angry and clarifying that Cheyenne was only stating a common belief, not her own opinion. Caroline reluctantly concedes with a quiet yes, though her expression suggests this is a familiar, frustrating topic. He then begins his explanation. He describes how people typically use magic by converting their mana into spells tied to a specific attribute, like fire. His own magic, which he calls non-attribute, uses the raw energy of mana without changing its form. Cheyenne listens intently, admitting she has never heard of such a concept. Unfazed, Zex declares that if it doesn't exist, he will simply invent it, clarifying that being colorless only means his mana isn't tied to an element, not that he lacks it entirely. To demonstrate, he extends his hand, and a shimmering stream of pure energy flows from his palm toward Cheyenne's. How is it, he asks. As the energy touches her, Cheyenne looks down in astonishment. Caroline watches, her expression a mix of curiosity and awe. A sudden, pleasant warmth spreads through Cheyenne's chest, an unexpected feeling of pure joy. She stood, still processing the unique sensation, as Zex internally reflected on the nature of his power. The spell he had just cast on Cheyenne was a form of mental magic he had created himself. Unable to manifest spells externally, he had theorized he could send his mana directly into a person to create an internal effect. He recalled a previous time when he had used a spell called Unsettle to destabilize Cheyenne's emotions, and acknowledged that this emotion-manipulating magic could be incredibly dangerous depending on its application. Breaking his internal reverie, he turned to Cheyenne with a smile, informing her that he had developed other types of magic as well, but would save them for later. He then asked if she would keep a secret. With a slight blush, she readily agreed, addressing him as Zexama. Suddenly, Caroline rushed forward, grabbing her brother's free hand. With a fierce blush, she loudly declared that she would be happy to hold his hand as well. As she watched Caroline cling to Zex, Cheyenne quietly wondered if she was truly trusted to the point that he would share such a profound secret with her. Seeing the siblings walk off together, she murmured to herself that she didn't mind. Sometime later, Zex sat alone by a window, engrossed in a book. He noted to himself that his 5th birthday was approaching. He decided it was time to learn more about the world outside the estate, specifically how merchants and commoners lived. His thoughts drifted to potential places of interest, such as churches and the Adventurers Guild. His gaze shifted across the room to where Cheyenne stood near Caroline. He noted that his brother Karen had not yet returned, and that the children's lecture wasn't over. He considered asking Cheyenne for help, but immediately realized the complication. Caroline would surely insist on coming along. He couldn't take her to a place he hadn't personally verified as safe. With this in mind, he looked toward Cheyenne, beginning to ask her something. Within the Grand Flammable Manor, a small, worried figure stands alone in a long hallway. It is Caroline, her voice echoing with concern as she calls out, "Oni-ai-sama? Where are you, Oni-ai-sama?" Her calls draw the attention of the maid, Cheyenne, who notices Karen sitting dejectedly by an open doorway. "Hey Karen," she asks gently, "what's the matter?" Through the doorway, Caroline can be seen running outside, continuing her desperate search. Meanwhile, the very brother she seeks, Zex, strolls obliviously through the streets of the nearby town. He analyzes his surroundings with a critical eye. The main street seems merely SOSO, and he suspects entering any high-class stores dressed as he might cause problems. The alleys, on the other hand, do not feel safe. His gaze falls upon a fruit stand. The produce looks delicious, but he has no idea of its cost. He resolves to ask Cheyenne about market prices later. Continuing his walk, he observes a group of children playing happily without any adults nearby. This sight leads him to a positive conclusion. The town must be safe enough for them to be on their own. His thoughts then shift to a practical dilemma. He wants to buy and eat some local treats on his next visit, but he lacks money. He ponders how to acquire funds, quickly dismissing the idea of asking the butler, as it would be far too suspicious. A fleeting, cynical thought crosses his mind. Is his useless father actually doing his job? He immediately discards the notion, attributing the estate's smooth operation solely to the competence of their excellent butler, Cenis. Back at the manor, Caroline's frantic search leads her directly to Cheyenne. With a panicked look, she demands to know, "Cheyenne, where is Oni-ai-sama?" From his seat, just inside the door, Karen speaks up, gesturing to himself. I'm right here, aren't I? Caroline spins around, her face twisted in frustration as she shouts, You're not my Oni-sama. Her anger melts away into a dreamy, blushing expression. She explains to a bewildered Cheyenne that her Oni-sama is much cooler, that he sparkles, and that whenever she looks at him, she gets all warm and fuzzy and can't help but blush. Her emotional confession culminates in a direct confrontation with her other brother, Karen. She points accusingly, shouting that he is nothing like Zex and cannot trick her. As Karen reels back, Cheyenne steps in, gently chiding Caroline that a lady does not point and assuring Karen that she will explain everything. She then reveals a startling truth to Karen. The body he currently inhabits is a fake, a construct created by combining her disguise magic with Zex's mental magic. Cheyenne asks that he treat it as the real thing until Zex returns, warning that to do otherwise could cause trouble for him. Hearing this explanation, Caroline's face flushes with a mixture of confusion and hurt as she quietly questions why this was done. Her quiet hurt quickly turns to frustrated anger. She confronts Karen, demanding to know why she had to learn this from Cheyenne instead of him. She accuses both him and Zex of keeping a secret from her ever since Cheyenne arrived at the manor. Her hands clench the fabric of her dress, her voice trembling as she repeats her desperate question. Why couldn't he just tell her? Her desperation deepens into a possessive fear. In her mind, she realizes that her brother Zex is all she has, pleading silently for him not to be taken away from her. This intense, possessive emotion manifests visibly, a dark and chaotic aura erupting from her small frame as she stands trembling with rage and sorrow. Witnessing this alarming display, Cheyenne immediately kneels before Caroline. She confesses that she was, at least initially, a spy sent to observe them. She explains that while she cannot tell Caroline everything, she is bound by a magical contract to Zex that prevents her from reporting anything that could bring them harm. As Cheyenne finishes her confession, Karen quietly apologizes for his part in the deception. Cheyenne then clarifies her position to a still distraught Caroline, explaining that Zex does not rely on her out of trust, but rather keeps her close to monitor her. She states plainly that he feels nothing for her. Caroline listens, her expression softening slightly. She concedes that it's fine and natural for Cheyenne to think that way, especially given her position. With tears welling in her eyes, she admits that while nobody wants to admit they've done wrong, she still feels that her brother relies on Cheyenne, even if just a little. While she slept, Zex considered her earlier words. He mused that her claim of always watching him must be true, but the thought was bittersweet. None of his own memories would be passed on, and he lamented that his true self, the adult from his past life, wasn't there to hear her confession. He was also taken aback, realizing his clone hadn't fooled her for even a moment. He discussed the clone's failure with Cheyenne, who confirmed that the moment Caroline saw the copy, she knew it wasn't him, though no one else had any idea. Zex, his expression hardening with resolve, stated that they needed to improve the clone, concerned that talented mages or spies might notice something was amiss. He declared that Cheyenne would help him. His thoughts then turned to his brother. He asked Cheyenne how Karen had reacted upon discovering the deception. Cheyenne reported that Karen simply waited for the real Zex to return, staying awake until he finally fell asleep. Zex clarified that he wasn't interested in a simple report. He wanted to know how his brother truly felt. Cheyenne offered her analysis, suggesting that Caroline might be overly dependent on him. Zex agreed, realizing that besides himself and Karen, his sister's relationships were limited to adults of lower status. He concluded that her social development had been warped, and it was likely his own fault. This realization spurred him to action. He announced that Caroline should come with him into town and, to her surprise, revealed that he had also created a body double for her. He presented his first attempt at her clone, a crude version that looked nothing like her, causing both Caroline and Karen to stare in blank disbelief. He then revealed two perfect replicas, wondering why his initial attempt was so flawed when he should have been able to install a perfect copy of her mind. The two perfect clones touched hands, as if in silent agreement. Slumped on a couch, Zex contemplated the situation. He acknowledged that he had deliberately limited his sister's relationships to only those he could trust. The fault was his, he concluded, as their parents hadn't even considered arranging playdates with other noble children. To rectify this, he began explaining the mechanics of his magic to Cheyenne. He revealed that the clone's body is merely a formless lump of his mana, intangible like light, which is why they need someone to provide a cover. He called Cheyenne over, stating that he was counting on her. She agreed, ready to assist. He then instructed her to cast disguise, magic, explaining that it is her power that makes the mana constructs visible to others. To demonstrate and prepare for their outing, he altered his and Caroline's appearances, giving them brown hair and green eyes to avoid standing out in town. Caroline beamed, expressing her simple happiness that she and her brother now matched. On a trip into town, Zex walks hand in hand with his younger sister, Caroline. He is dressed in simple clothes and glasses, looking more like a common boy than a noble. He internally reflects on this special trip with just the two of them, while Caroline happily sings about her outing with her Oni-sama. He gazes at her with pure adoration, his heart swelling as he thinks about how unbelievably cute his sister is. Caroline, oblivious to his thoughts, beams with pure, unadulterated joy. As they continue down the bustling street, a passing woman pauses, remarking aloud on what a cute pair of children they are. Caroline, still holding her brother's hand, continues to look forward with bright-eyed excitement. Their path leads them to a square where a group of local children are playing. Both Zex and Caroline stop in their tracks, their expressions filled with mutual surprise at the lively scene. Upon seeing them, Caroline's eyes widen in fascination. She points and exclaims, "Kids," noting that she's never seen children other than her brothers before. Zex observes her reaction, thinking she looks like she's just spotted a rare animal. Before he can react, she yells, "Wait up," and dashes forward. Her sudden burst of speed and excitement causes her to lose her footing. Zex cries out in alarm as he watches her trip and fall headfirst onto the dusty ground. Her tumble lands her right in the middle of the group of children, who gather around her with curiosity. One asks who she is, as they've never seen her before. Another questions if they are siblings who just moved to the area. Zex, holding on to Caroline, gives a friendly wave and greets them. Looking up at her brother with a hopeful yet timid expression, Caroline clasps her hands together. She quietly asks for his permission to approach the children herself. She turns to the group and, with the formal posture of a noble lady, asks if it would be agreeable for her to play with them. One of the children immediately grabs her hand and agrees to play. However, others remark on her strange, adult-like way of speaking, though one boy defends her, saying it was fine. Despite the initial awkwardness, the children quickly decide to play rock, paper, scissors together. Watching from a distance, Zex feels a wave of relief. He considers that the servants at home would likely faint if they saw a high-status lady like Caroline playing so freely with commoners. But he concludes that this experience is good for her and that everything should be fine. While playing, one of the young girls lectures a boy, her arms crossed decisively. She explains that she wants Karen to learn to ask for things sincerely and accept them in good faith. The boy seems uncertain, while another child celebrates a victory in rock, paper, scissors. The children then turn their attention to Karen, calling out and asking if he will play with them too. He agrees, saying he is on his way. From a short distance, Zex watches the interaction with a pensive look. Later that evening, during bath time, Caroline animatedly recounts the day's events to Karen. She bubbles with excitement as she describes what a boy named Dan said, and then what a girl named Miria did, her hands gesturing to emphasize her story. As she chatters on, the maid Cheyenne gently rinses the soap from her hair. Cheyenne then turns to Karen, who has been listening quietly, and asks if he had fun. He confirms that he did. With her bath nearly finished, Caroline looks up at her brother with wide, hopeful eyes. She quietly asks him if they can go play with their new friend again. Karen immediately agrees. Overjoyed, Caroline throws her arms around him in a splashy hug, proclaiming her love for her Oni-sama. Nearby, Cheyenne observes with a sigh, muttering that a lady does not hug people while naked. Meanwhile, among Caroline's new friends, the topic of siblings is discussed with less reverence. One girl complains about her own brother, prompting another to declare her jealousy. A third girl, however, proudly states that her brother, Karen, is her pride and joy. The complaining girl continues, listing her brother's faults. He's awful, he stinks, and he even stole a tomato from her plate the previous night. She laments that he gets angry easily and always hits people, just as a boy is seen doing exactly that in the background. Despite any sibling squabbles, the children's games carry on. They gather in a circle for a round of rock, paper, scissors, and one boy excitedly shouts that it's time for hide and seek. As the game starts, one of the girls notices Karen standing still. She asks him what's wrong and urges him to hurry and hide. Karen, however, is frozen in mild panic, realizing that he lost the first game and must now be a role he seems entirely unprepared for. He looks down at his younger sister, Caroline, who gazes up at him with concern, asking if he can manage. He gently explains to her that she is the one who needs this experience, that learning to navigate the town alone will be important for her future. As she runs off with a small laugh, he watches her go, a wry thought crossing his mind. He feels more like a father than a brother, a feeling that makes sense given he could have had a child her age before he died. He accepts the situation, thinking that she is growing up and things are proceeding well. As Karen's count echoes through the streets, nearing its end, another child calls for Caroline to follow them into an alley. Just as she turns to enter, a large hand suddenly clamps over her mouth from behind, stifling her cry. Her eyes widen in terror as the final count of 100 is called out. Completely oblivious to his sister's plight, Karen turns from his spot. He cups his hands around his mouth and calls out into the seemingly empty town square. "Are you ready?" A game begins with a flash of imagined peril. A dark, gloved hand smothers a young girl's mouth, her green eyes wide with shock. Below this vision, a chaotic scene erupts in a tavern as ruffians seize children. One man struggles to hold a squirming child, possibly Karen, while another girl screams for them to be released. The imagined terror continues as the girl, Caroline, struggles against her captor. She tries to scream a warning to a boy named Dan, who turns with a look of confusion just as a large, menacing man appears behind him. But the danger was only in his mind. In reality, the infant prodigy Zex is simply playing hide and seek, his hands covering his eyes as he finishes his count. Ready or not, "Here I come," he calls out. He uncovers his eyes and scans the empty town square. Finding no one, he jokes to himself that their lack of response is so complete, it's as if they were corpses. Beginning his search with a few stretches, he muses that staying silent is a smart tactic for children. He knows he could use his detection magic to find them all in an instant, but considers the implications. He takes a deep breath, contemplating his power. After all, every human possesses a small amount of mana. His self-created detection spell is a non-elemental magic that sends out waves to sense the magic of others nearby. Despite the temptation, he decides against it. Using magic would be childish, he reasons. The entire point of the game is to find them with his own eyes and feet. With a determined expression, he sets off. His natural skills prove more than sufficient. He quickly finds a group of children, shouting gotcha. Dan is amazed at how fast Zex was, and another girl is shocked he found her hiding spot. Zex laughs triumphantly, boasting that this is nothing for him, as the other children marvel at his skill. After gathering Dan, Miria, and Tara, Zex pauses. He calculates that only Karen and another boy are left to find. But as he considers this, a sudden, chilling premonition washes over him. Something feels deeply wrong. His playful demeanor vanishes. Trusting his gut instinct over the rules of the game, he brings his fingers to his lips and quietly unleashes his detection magic, sending a silent pulse of mana out into the town. He recognizes the flare of magic instantly. It is Karen's, the emergency signal they had agreed upon for the absolute worst-case scenarios. All sense of a game vanishes, replaced by cold dread as he sprints through the city streets. Realizing he needs more precise information, Zex pauses briefly. He casts his detection spell once more, his senses expanding outwards. He pinpoints Caroline's location and senses Karen is even deeper inside whatever structure they are in. With a new direction, he dashes off into an alleyway. The ground is too slow. He leaps onto the rooftops, deciding it will be faster. He reinforces his body with magic and dashes forward, the results of his spell clarifying in his mind. Karen is with Dan and Miria, but Tara has been separated from the group. With grim determination etched on his face, he bounds across the tiles, his small form a blur against the sky. He pauses, closing his eyes to focus. His magic has detected not just the children, but 3 other, unidentified mana sources nearby. Looking down into the alley below, his worst fears materialize. A large man holds a terrified, gagged Miria, while Dan lies motionless on the cobblestones. A second man stands guard. A choked gasp escapes Zex's lips as he realizes that charging in recklessly would be a fatal mistake. From his vantage point, he forces himself to think. He must calm down. A frontal assault is too dangerous. They could take a hostage before he could knock them all out. Elsewhere, hidden from view, Caroline clutches a piece of fabric, her expression resolute. She knows something is wrong and internally debates what she should do, preparing herself to intervene. Suddenly, a loud bang echoes through the alley as Tara bursts onto the scene, wielding a wooden bat. "Give me my brother back," she yells. The kidnappers are caught completely off guard, one blurting out her name in surprise while the other grins, seeing her as just another prize. As one of the men mockingly beckons Tara forward, Zex analyzes the new development from above. He realizes that her reckless bravery was, in fact, a great move. Every one of the kidnappers now has their eyes locked on Tara, creating the perfect diversion. He realizes that simply free-falling is too slow. In a flash of inspiration, he decides to compress mana under his foot, creating a solid platform in midair. With a firm push, he launches himself forward, accelerating his descent to strike. In the narrow alley, Zex launches himself through the air, landing a solid punch on the kidnapper's jaw. The man stumbles back, stunned, as Zex lands, his mind already on the next target. One more to go. His opponent, however, dodges the follow-up attack. Zex realizes with frustration that even with his physical abilities enhanced 5-fold by magic, he is still just a 4-year-old and no true match for an adult. He worries that the 2 men he already knocked out will soon recover, and regrets never having learned any martial arts. The man grabs him from behind, trapping him. Just as Zex struggles in his grasp, a brilliant burst of flame erupts, engulfing them both. Across the alley, Caroline stands with her hands outstretched, the source of the inferno. Engulfed in fire, the kidnapper screams in agony, stumbling away and crying for help. Zex, caught in the periphery of the blast, can only watch in shock. He stands over the fallen, smoldering man. As his brother Dan calls out to him, Zex coldly informs the unconscious kidnapper that as a final mercy, he'll extinguish the flames, though he makes no promises about the man's hair. Nearby, the other captive children, Tara and Miria, gather around the second unconscious kidnapper, crying for their brother to answer them. The sight of the carnage sends a wave of panic through Zex. Realizing how bad the situation looks, he hastily attempts a concealment spell. His focus is broken by Caroline, who, overwhelmed with fear, begins to cry for help. Her cries attract a newcomer. A man with long, light-colored hair appears at the alley's entrance, drawn by the noise. His eyes scan the chaotic scene before settling on the weeping Caroline, whose hand he gently takes. As he comforts her, A gentle, sparkling light emanates from Caroline. The healing energy flows over the bloodied, unconscious kidnapper and envelopes Zex, who has collapsed from his own injuries. Zex awakens, surrounded by the other children and the mysterious man. He touches his face, confused as to why he feels no pain after being beaten so badly. Caroline reassures him that it's okay now. Overcome with relief, Zex embraces his sister, crying and admitting he was sure he was going to die. He understands he is alive because of her. Sometime after the rescue, the children are gathered. One girl points to Karen, asking about his different hair color. Another child immediately scolds her, declaring that golden hair is the mark of the saintess. The comment causes Caroline to falter, and Karen calls out her name in concern, leaving the others behind. The two siblings begin to walk away from the village. Caroline suddenly stops. Seeing her pained expression, Karen turns back and calls her name again, his voice laced with worry. She turns to him, Zex still perched on her back, and apologizes for breaking her promise. With tears in her eyes, she calls herself a bad girl. Bowing her head in shame, she begs him not to hate her for her actions. Karen immediately refutes this. He insists that he was the one too slow to help and that he knew she would come for him. To prove his point, he lifts her onto his own back, now carrying both of his siblings. He continues their conversation, asking if she would have stopped her rescue of Dan, even if he had told her to. Caroline admits she wouldn't have, that the need to save him was so strong it eclipsed her promise. Karen understands, telling her she was a huge help. He tells her there's nothing to apologize for, and that she is a sister he can be proud of. He proposes that since they're close siblings, they should support each other, and that if she would help him when he's in trouble, then they are even. She readily agrees. Her spirits lifted, Caroline notices a burn on Karen's hand. He dismisses it as a small injury from using fire magic to burn the ropes. She then enthusiastically promises to be the one to help him next time. As he carries her into the twilight, she spots the first evening star and makes a silent wish for her brother to grow up well and without trouble. A week has passed since Karen and the other children were attacked by thugs. Zex reflects that, all things considered, the situation was resolved with relative smoothness. He recalls the measures he took. First, he had to ensure Dan and the other children kept quiet, which they agreed to after he saved their lives. To protect his brother's secret, Zex also put pressure on them, orchestrating a scene where Dan would loudly proclaim that Karen couldn't use light magic, a clever misdirection that even Karen seemed unaware of. Following these events, Zex finds himself accompanying his siblings to an unfamiliar part of town. Shine expresses concern for Lady Caroline, but Caroline insists that as a count's daughter, she has a duty to the people and couldn't refuse their pleas for help. Zex observes her, thinking that while her commitment to noblesse oblige is admirable, it's still a bit of a stretch for her. He admits to himself that after everything, he couldn't say no to her either. Caroline, filled with resolve, declares that as a daughter of the Forlana family, it is her duty to improve the lives of the people. At that moment, Karen spots their destination, pointing ahead and announcing, "There he is." They approach a figure huddled under a filthy covering in an alley. The man beneath it growls, asking what they are staring at and ordering the kids to scram, stating that this is no playground. His sharp, intense eye glares from beneath the hood, causing Cheyenne to gasp in shock. Zex quickly places a hand on her arm to calm her. He thinks to himself that there is no mistake. Though the man sounds harsh, he is merely worried about them. This is the one they've been looking for. He reveals the man's identity. His name is Porble, and he is the one who maintains order in this slum at the edge of Forlana's capital. Zex had decided that Porble was the right person to approach. Stepping forward with confidence, Zex introduces himself formally as Zex Levitu San Fornata, son of the Fornata Lord. He addresses the man as Sir Porble and states that they have come to negotiate, acknowledging that it might sound absurd. Porble repeats the word negotiate with skepticism. Shine introduces Caroline and herself. Zex then explains their purpose. Shady individuals have infiltrated the city, and even if the current ones are caught, there's a risk that more will come. He clarifies that they simply want to get rid of the intruders and restore public order. When Porble scoffs at the idea of nobles caring, Zex counters that people like Porble tend to hide in places like this. He directly tasks Porble as the one in charge, with sniffing out anyone who doesn't belong and wiping out the rabble, stating he won't allow his own people to be put at risk. He watched as the tense negotiation immediately escalated. The slum keeper, Porble, roared for them to get lost. As the man lunged, Karen instinctively moved to shield Caroline, who cried out her brother's name in alarm. In the wake of the outburst, Caroline stepped forward. She explained that her brother had saved her, and that this was her first time in town where she had made friends. She pleaded that she didn't want anything terrible to happen to them or anyone else in the city. While Karen tried to reassure her that they had the nights, Caroline turned back to Porble, begging him to lend them his strength. Her hands clasped tightly in front of her, she made a solemn vow, promising she would do anything she could to help. To punctuate her desperate plea, she knelt upon the grimy ground, bowing her head low before the slum keeper. "I'm begging you," she implored. "Please, let us borrow your strength." Porble was utterly taken aback. He stared, processing the unbelievable sight of a noble girl kneeling and bowing her head in the dirt. As the man stood frozen in disbelief, Zex seized the moment. He declared that they would not sacrifice anyone from the slums. If Porble simply gave them the information, they would handle the rest and increase patrols. He then pressed the man, asking if his answer was still no. He then produced a heavy pouch of coins, its contents clinking audibly. He offered it as a monthly payment, glancing at Cheyenne to confirm they were not asking for free assistance. She affirmed his statement. The offer of payment was the final push needed. Porble accepted the money, agreeing to help them. He then threw his head back in exasperation, complaining that they should have led with the money from the start. With the deal secured, Caroline looked up with a radiant, relieved smile, thanking the man she now called uncle. Porble, holding her small hand, gave a dismissive but accepting reply as Karen watched. As the group walked away from the slums, Cheyenne turned to Zex with a worried expression. She questioned whether they could truly trust a man who could be so easily swayed by gold. Standing with his sister Caroline and their maid Cheyenne, Zex explains his strategy. He posits that even if it's not entirely true, providing a convenient excuse like nobles are the enemy might prevent people from clinging to their old, destructive values. Cheyenne, however, looks unconvinced, questioning if he truly believes that. He touches his eye, reminding her that his magic allows him to read emotions. Because of this ability, he is certain of his assessment. His attention then shifts to Caroline, who has been observing the conversation. With a gentle expression, he asks her directly, "Are you scared of me?" Caroline immediately dismisses the notion, exclaiming that she isn't scared at all. She turns to her other brother, Karen, gives him a kiss on the cheek, and affirms that he is still her beloved big brother. Karen, touched, replies that he loves her too. Watching this tender moment, Cheyenne's expression remains serious. An internal thought begins to form. To her, Zex-sama is terrifying. The thought concludes with stark finality, her face set with a grim understanding of the boy's nature. The scene flashes back to the interrogation of the kidnappers. Zex stands before their cage, coldly listing their confirmed crimes: theft, kidnapping, and attempted murder. He reminds them that in this territory, such acts carry the death penalty. One of the men, Porble, recoils in terror, screaming for the devil to stay back. Zex reflects on his hesitation to use his powers to harm people, which had stunted his magical progress. But after the kidnapping, he could no longer guarantee Karen's safety. With his brother's survival as his top priority, he resolved to use his abilities to their full, albeit inhumane, extent. In the background, the kidnappers cry out in agony under his mental assault. His internal monologue continues over a view of the family estate. The kidnapping forced him to realize how little power he truly possessed. This harsh lesson spurred him to move quickly and seize control of the Count's household. Years pass. Now 6 years old, Zex sits at a desk across from his father. He explains that by gaining influence over key figures, he grasped the internal affairs of the Fornata domain and, just 3 days ago, on his 6th birthday, discovered something alarming. He stood before his father in the Grand Library, learning of the alarming discovery he had made. In the Holy Kingdom, nobles are bound by law. Within 10 years of inheriting a title, they must father 2 male heirs. His father, looking grim, stated that they would have to adopt. Zex processed this, gazing out the window. The household currently only had him and his brother, Karen. His father's voice continued, explaining a harsh reality of their world. The higher a fetus's magical power, the more likely the mother is to die in childbirth. Since nobles possess high magic capacity, polygamy had become the norm to secure the family line. As this grim conversation unfolded, his sister Caroline waved cheerfully from the gardens below, completely oblivious to the weight of their family's predicament. He turned back to his father, asking when he had inherited the title. The answer was 9 years ago. The implication was dire. At this rate, they would not just lose the house, but could be exiled as criminals. Zex quickly asserted that while he had no specific magic attribute, tools had confirmed he carried the bloodline's power. He then questioned if an adopted, non-blood-related child would fulfill the legal requirement. His father clarified the law. The eldest son must be a blood relative, but adoption was permitted for any subsequent sons. Furthermore, if the eldest son were to die, the family line could be officially overwritten under special circumstances. Zex's mind, far older than his body, immediately recognized the loophole, a way to legally hijack a noble family. Unaware of his son's cynical thoughts, his father presented a file, explaining they had received an offer from a baron's family to adopt their son. The phrase, hijacking a noble family, echoed in Zex's mind, sparking a disturbing sense of familiarity. He took the document, his eyes widening in utter shock as he read the name printed on it. The name was Orca Falgadayu Ninbaya Kadai. After a moment of stunned silence, Zex regained his composure. He dismissed his reaction as nothing and calmly instructed his father to proceed with the adoption. His father simply acknowledged the command. His mind, however, was reeling. He recalled the game from his past life. Orca was one of the romance options, but more importantly, in his story route, he was the sworn enemy destined to take over the Fornata family. Zex remembered the world's lore. The Holy Kingdom was a religious state with 2 factions, monotheists who worshipped the human god as supreme, and polytheists who saw all gods as equal. Orca's family was part of the beastskin race, and their conflicting beliefs were a major source of strife. The very person fated to destroy his house was about to be welcomed into it. He recalled the harsh reality of this world, racial discrimination. The toxic idea of human superiority, championed by the monotheist faction, ran rampant, a prejudice grimly symbolized by the image of a shackled and brutalized beastkin. Although the current royal family's polytheist beliefs tempered open persecution, beastkin nobles had to navigate their lives with extreme caution. One misstep meant a complete fall from grace, a fate represented by the looming guillotine. This was exactly what befell Orca's family, the Byakudai Baronhouse. Sensing the looming threat of civil war, Orca's parents made a desperate choice to save their youngest child by sending him away to be adopted. At the Flameral estate, the butler Senas announces the arrival of Zek-sama and Orca-sama, directing them to the parlor. Karen remarks on the quickness of their guest's arrival, noting it has been less than a month since the offer was sent. He tells his sister Caroline that they should go, and Zex agrees. As they walk through the rose garden, Zex's mind turns to the grim future he knows from the game. He reminds himself to remain vigilant, recalling that in just 1 year, the Byakudai baronial house is destined to fall to civil unrest, with most of its members either being slaughtered or sold into slavery. The cause of his concern appears before them, a young boy with prominent, twitching cat-like ears adorned with small flowers. The boy announces that it is an honor to meet them and that he has been chosen as the newest member of their family. He formally introduces himself as a new addition to the Fornata family. Sitting primly on a sofa, the boy completes his introduction. I'm Orca Falgata, Yunin Byakudai. It's a pleasure to meet you. Zex is internally stunned, thinking only of how incredibly cute the boy is. Zex's shock gives way to horror as he recalls the game's plot. He and Caroline were the villains who tormented this very child. He questions what kind of monsters they were. As he reels from this realization, Caroline steps forward, introducing herself and her older brother, Zex, the eldest son of Count Fornata. Later, in the parlor, Caroline attempts to break the ice with a nervous Orca. She suggests that since they're family now, there is no need for formality and they should all get along. Orca timidly agrees, thanking Lord Zex and Lady Caroline. Orca then apologizes, explaining that the long journey has left him quite tired. Karen thoughtfully offers to show him around the estate, but Senas interjects, suggesting it would be better to escort Lord Orca to his room to rest. Karen concedes it was a thoughtless idea. Meanwhile, Zex understands the urgency. To follow Orca's route from the game, they must bond with him now. As Orca is led away by the butler, Karen waves with a strained smile, thinking to himself that this might be tougher than he expected. Caroline watches them leave, her expression unreadable. Zex reflects on the past week. His initial worry was justified, as Orca has remained withdrawn, spending most of his time in his room. He decides that while they let him be for a week given the circumstances of his arrival, it is now time to change course. He resolves to actively reach out, knowing their own future hinges on getting close to the boy. His plan for a welcoming tea party seemed perfect. He had envisioned a lovely garden, delicious tea, and sweet pastries, creating the ideal setting for pleasant conversation. The guest list was simple: himself, Karen, and Orca, with Shine attending. But his careful planning was instantly disrupted by the sudden appearance of his sister, Caroline, who startled the timid Orca by calling out to Karen. The atmosphere at the table immediately grew tense. While Cheyenne stood watch, Orca hunched over, his head bowed low. Across from him, Caroline took a deliberate sip of her tea, her expression unreadable but stern. Caroline then spoke to Karen, noting that Orca's tension was expected, as he'd been that way since his arrival. She then revealed that Karen had been overjoyed when she invited him for a private tea time with Big Brother. Hearing this, Zex was struck with confusion. As the realization sank in, Caroline's expression hardened further while she brought the teacup to her lips once more. She turned her attention back to Karen, questioning why Cheyenne was present. Caroline stated she had assumed this was meant to be a bonding event just for the siblings. Karen seemed taken aback. Caroline then addressed her brother, suggesting he should try to get Orca to say something. In response, Karen sheepishly admitted his mistake. He reasoned that since they were all gathered, they should take the opportunity to get to know one another, reminding them that as family, they ought to offer each other support. Caroline's face lit up with a startling intensity. She declared that she was quite content to simply support her dear brother, Karen. Her fervent declaration sent a wave of terror through both Zex and Orca, who physically recoiled in fear. Completely oblivious to their reaction, Karen smiled kindly. He gently told Orca not to be so frightened, explaining that it was natural to be anxious in a strange, new place. He tried to reassure the boy, affirming that he was a kind person. But as Karen spoke his gentle words, Caroline's eyes narrowed into a chilling, predatory glare directed squarely at the terrified Zex and Orca. The scene was a portrait of dysfunction. Karen smiling sweetly, Caroline sipping her tea with quiet menace, and Orca frozen in fear. Overwhelmed, Zex could only scream internally, wondering how everything had gone so horribly wrong. In a sun-dappled forest, the young Zex practices his abilities. He enhances his physical form, activates a detection spell that radiates outwards, and cloaks himself in a protective layer of magic while wielding a practice sword. He puts this training to the test against a large, black cobra-like magic beast, swiftly dispatching it. He internally questions why he is hunting these creatures, concluding that it's to accumulate real battle experience with his attributeless magic, a process he likens to leveling up in a game. His detection magic immediately alerts him to another beast approaching from his 2 o'clock. He reflects that while levels don't actually exist as a concept in this world, it is common knowledge that one's abilities grow stronger by defeating magic beasts. A mental overlay, like a status screen from his old world, shows his progress. Job: Temple Knight Apprentice, level 25, with skills like Pursuit, Counter, and Dodge. He continues to ponder the nature of these creatures. Magic beasts are animals that have absorbed magical particles from the air, evolving into more savage forms and becoming general enemies of humanity. It is theorized that defeating them allows the victor to absorb their surplus mana, strengthening them, though the exact why and how remain unexplained. His thoughts turn to the practicalities. Since civilians struggle against magic beasts, it naturally falls to knights and adventurers to handle them. He knows that hunting these creatures is part of the Academy's curriculum and a far more effective way to grow stronger than simple training. As the sun begins to set, he resolves not to waste the opportunity, recalling a mini-game from his past life where one would defeat monsters with companions to raise affection points. With that resolve, he prepares for one last attack. All right, this is the last one, he decides, aiming his hand forward. A concentrated blast of pure energy erupts from his palm as he shouts, "Shot!" The shot streaks through the air and impacts a distant tree with a sharp crack. Zex lowers his hand, panting slightly. He notes with frustration how inefficient the attack is, consuming almost all of his internal mana for just a single shot. Having nearly depleted his reserves, he agrees with Orca's suggestion to head home. As they walk, Zex reflects on his poor performance, concluding that it's a mana control problem and he still has a long way to go. His thoughts are interrupted as Cheyenne calls his name. As he walks, his thoughts drift to another pressing issue. The rift between his brother Karen and Orca has not improved one bit. A symbolic image shows the two of them standing back to back, their expressions downcast and distant. His contemplation is interrupted when Cheyenne formally asks for a moment of his time. What is it, he asks. Internally, he feels at a loss, realizing that Karen is more of a brocon and Orca is more standoffish than he had ever anticipated. He is startled when Cheyenne correctly observes that he seems out of sorts. Internally, Zex chides himself, realizing he has been too naive. He looks at Cheyenne, questioning if her concern is genuine. He finds it hard to believe she would actually worry about someone who had forced contract magic upon her. She asks if he is alone, and he confirms. Cheyenne then offers advice, suggesting that if simply creating opportunities for Karen and Orca to be together isn't enough, perhaps he should speak with each of them privately. She admits she is also worried about how to make them get along and asks if he has any better ideas. Continuing her suggestion, Cheyenne recommends that Zex make time to be with Karen alone, speculating that this might reveal his brother's true feelings. She points out that while his distance from Orca is clear, he also hasn't spent any one-on-one time with Karen since arriving. The realization strikes Zex, and he thanks her for the excellent idea. Cheyenne humbly dismisses his praise. Internally, however, she recognizes the gravity of the situation. It is a significant gamble for a noble like Zex to expose his family's vulnerabilities to someone he knows is a spy. He watches her, fully aware of the risk he is taking. He knows the contract forbidding her from leaking information about the siblings has a loophole. It doesn't apply to Orca. This means Cheyenne could, at this very moment, be relaying information to her employer. He can only wonder if this gamble will succeed. Despite the risks, he decides to follow her advice and speak with Karen first. He resolves that his future treatment of Cheyenne will depend entirely on her subsequent actions. Acting on his resolution, Zex visits his brother. Karen welcomes him, remarking that it has been a long time since Zex was in his room and invites him to take a seat. Zex internally recalls using his 5th birthday as an excuse to get separate rooms. The memory of Caroline's intense, tearful protest, screaming that she wanted to stay with him, comes back to him. His brother asks what the matter is. Before Zex can answer, Karen hesitantly asks if Orca is coming today, then stops himself. The question catches Zex by surprise. Looking downcast, Karen immediately apologizes, taking the blame upon himself. He confesses that he hadn't realized they hadn't spent any time alone together recently, and admits he was being strangely stubborn without a clear reason. Overwhelmed, he bows his head deeply and shouts, "I'm sorry." He continued his apology, his voice heavy with regret. He declared himself a failure of a brother, admitting that the fault was entirely his. He confessed that he had selfishly tried to force his siblings to get along without ever considering how they truly felt. In response, Caroline cried out, vehemently denying his self-deprecation. She insisted he was not a failure, but her wonderful, one and only older brother. From his crib, Zex mentally accepted the apology, thanking Karen and asking him to stop. She then confessed, her voice softer now, that she had been jealous. It was the same feeling she had when Cheyenne was around. Caroline explained that she had been too young to understand her own emotions back then, but now, she finally understood. The weight of her confession brought tears to her eyes. As Karen watched, she choked out her deepest fear, that one day, he would no longer need her. Seeing her distress, Karen immediately apologized for making her feel that way and moved forward, pulling her into a comforting embrace. He held her close, reassuring her that while his future as a person and a noble would be filled with obligations, there was one thing that would never change. He made her a solemn promise. She would always be number one in his heart. He leaned in closer, telling her she was his one and only little sister, the person he loved most in the world. He acknowledged she might feel jealous again, but asked her to remember his words. Blushing, Caroline agreed and made a request of her own, a promise that he would hug her just like this whenever she felt jealous again. Orca sits rigidly, shivering with his cat, ears twitching uncontrollably. Zex, noticing his guest's discomfort, offers him a cup of tea, suggesting it will help him relax. Though Orca hesitantly agrees, Zex internally observes that the constant twitching indicates his efforts are not working. He takes a cautious sip from the cup. A wave of warmth and flavor seems to wash over him, his expression momentarily softening into one of pure, blissful relief. The blissful moment is immediately followed by a powerful twitch of his tail as he exclaims his enthusiastic approval. Zex asks if he liked it, while privately noting that this intense reaction is still far from relaxed. Smiling warmly, he offers to pour another cup, expressing his gladness that Orca enjoys the blend. Zex insists on doing it himself, explaining that he couldn't possibly let someone of Orca's station pour his own tea. Orca is utterly stunned by the gesture, stammering in disbelief. Zex, meanwhile, internally reflects that brewing tea has been a cherished hobby of his since his past life, one for which he even held certifications. He misinterprets Orca's shock as fear and tries to reassure him, thinking the beastkin is simply scared of him. Flustered, Orca quickly apologizes, clarifying that he never meant to belittle Zex's interests, his ears twitching wildly with surprise. Leaning forward earnestly, Orca explains his reaction. He admits he was just shocked because Zex is completely different from the image he held of High Noble's son. He continues, voicing his preconceived notions, that High Nobles are arrogant, that they toy with others, and that they bully those beneath them for sport. Seeing Orca's hesitation, Zex offers a kind smile and promises he won't get mad, encouraging him to speak his mind. Orca's words trigger a sudden, chilling realization in Zex. With dawning horror, he understands that the cruel, arrogant nobles Orca is describing were, in fact, his family's role in the game he remembers. His mind flashes to the grim logic of that world, visualizing his and Caroline's silhouetted game avatars. He recalls the established truth. High nobles treat commoners as tools, trample even those just below them, and derive pleasure from the misfortune and crushed happiness of others. He recalled the grim details of the original story. In that timeline, he and his sister Caroline had relentlessly tormented their adopted brother, Orca, treating him as nothing more than a punching bag. A memory surfaced of Caroline pouring a drink over the boy's head as he himself stood by. This abuse continued until the game's heroine, the Saintess, appeared. She slowly healed Orca's spirit and eventually helped him overcome the terrifying Fornata family, taking him away from their grasp. That was the full outline of Orca's tragic route. Considering this past, Zex understood completely. It was no wonder Orca was so wary of them. He surmised that the boy had likely already been harassed by children from rival factions, even back at the Baikudai barony, long before arriving here. Bringing himself back to the present, Zex addressed the startled beastkin directly. He acknowledged that it might be hard to believe now, but he firmly stated that the Fornata family was on his side. He promised that both he and Karen would always stand with him and would never betray him. He continued, his tone softening. He told Orca that even if he couldn't believe them yet, it was fine to simply stay involved and observe them. After all, he reasoned, nothing could begin if they remained strangers to one another. Orca looked down, his hands clasped, and quietly agreed. Seeing this, Zex added that while he would, of course, like for them to become a real family, Orca should move at his own pace. With that, Zex turned and left the room, feeling he had pushed as much as he could for one day. He held on to the hope that by continuing to build contact, Orca would eventually open his heart and interact with them. Walking down the hall, lost in hopeful thought, he heard the faint tapping of feet. He glanced back to see Orca peeking out from the doorway. Before he could react, a heavy hand clamped down on his shoulder, startling him. A large, scarred guard captain grinned at him. The man expressed his gratitude for Zex's recent leniency, admitting he almost lost his composure when he saw the guards playing cards. He reported that since Zex began observing them, everyone had started training with renewed seriousness. The captain gestured towards the training grounds, noting that their armor and swords were now completely beaten up from the intense drills. He concluded that he would need to request a budget for replacements. Zex's expression grew serious as he absorbed this new information. He spots Orca in a hallway and calls out to him, suggesting he can drop the formal sama suffix when they speak. The beastkin boy, holding a book, turns in surprise, addressing Zex with the very honorific he was just told to discard. The boy immediately bows low, apologizing for being stopped and explaining he will be late. Flustered, he then questions if it is truly all right for Zex to hire a personal tutor for him. insisting that someone like him is undeserving of such special treatment. Later, during that very lesson, a female tutor quizzes Orca and Caroline. She asks for the 3 main achievements of the third Holy King. Orca, seated beside Caroline, hesitantly offers a partial answer: flood control. When Orca falters, unable to continue, the tutor turns to his sister. Caroline, however, answers without hesitation, confidently listing flood control, soil reform, and sewer systems as the reforms the king enacted for his people. Orca looks down, dejected. Her correct answer earns her praise from the tutor for having studied well, and Caroline closes her eyes, basking in a moment of pride with a satisfied smile. Her smile fades, however, as she glances over at Orca, who appears flustered and ashamed by the exchange. Attempting to understand, Caroline asks if he actually knew the answer. Startled, Orca vehemently denies it, insisting he would never dare speak out of turn before her. As she tries to explain that wasn't her meaning, he misunderstands and erupts in apologies. A report of this entire classroom exchange reaches Zex. He sits at his desk in his office, his expression turning serious as he processes the information, murmuring to himself, "I see." He maintains a composed, smiling facade as he formally dismisses the tutor, thanking her for the report. With Senna standing by, she acknowledges his command and prepares to depart. Once the tutor has gone, Zex's composure breaks. He slumps forward onto his desk with a flop, lamenting how tough raising children is. Standing behind him, Senna quietly affirms, "Indeed it is." While walking through the estate gardens, Caroline sighs with frustration. She reflects that Karen was being difficult again, but her thoughts quickly turn to Orca, who she feels is no better. He never says anything about himself, a fact that clearly troubles her. Her stroll leads her to the elderly gardener, who is busy working the soil. She approaches him with a smile, thanking him for his hard work and asking what he is planting. The gardener looks up, addressing her as Lady Karen. He explains that for now, he is just mixing fertilizer into the soil and that the actual planting will come after it settles. He then holds out a handful of earth and asks if there is a particular flower she would like him to plant for her. She initially replies that any flower would be fine, but then an idea strikes her. She requests a pale, purple flower, specifically one that matches the color of her brother Zex's eyes. The gardener chuckles warmly, remarking on how much she truly adores him. His observation brings a deep blush to her cheeks. With her hands clasped joyfully, Caroline beams and declares that of course she does. He is her brother, and she loves him more than anyone else in the world. As she revels in her happy declaration, a voice from the nearby bushes startles her. She turns, puzzled, thinking that there shouldn't be anyone over there. She promises the gardener she will handle it and approaches the sound. Peeking through the leaves, she finds the source of the voice. It is Orca, huddled by himself amongst the foliage, looking withdrawn. Surprised, she calls out his name. In the estate garden, Caroline looks on as the beastkin boy, Orca, sits huddled on the ground, his face buried in his hands. She quietly speaks his name, a question hanging in the air. As she watches, his small frame trembles. Tears stream down his cheeks, and Caroline realizes with a sudden shock that he is crying. The sight pierces her, and she sinks to her knees in distress. Her heart pounds as she internally questions if her own mean behavior was the cause. She swears to herself that she never, ever meant to make him cry. She remains frozen, unsure of what to do. She worries that approaching him now would only scare him more, especially if he is trying to avoid her. Feeling lost and conflicted, her thoughts drift to her mother for guidance. Orca continues to weep, consumed by the pain of being separated from his father, his brothers, everyone he loved. At the same time, Caroline imagines herself in his place, torn from her own brother and forced into a strange new life. A profound empathy for his loneliness begins to bloom within her. Having reached a decision, she finds her mother and Karen in the study. With firm resolve, Caroline announces that she intends to go into town with Orca. Her mother considers the proposal and agrees, but adds a crucial condition. Both children must use concealment magic. Caroline accepts without hesitation. Nearby, Karen watches them, quietly hoping that this fragile plan will succeed. Now in town, his beastkin features hidden by magic. Orca speaks to Caroline. He tells her that since they are in town, she should drop the honorifics and just call him Karen. A woman with glasses sees the two of them together and expresses her shock and worry, remarking that they had never gotten along before. Their conversation is interrupted as a group of local children run up to them. One girl greets Karen warmly, while a boy named Dan points to the disguised Orca and asks Karen if this is his friend. Dan then bluntly points at Orca and declares, "This kid's weird." Rather than reacting with anger or embarrassment, Orca simply looks at him and agrees. That's right. His calm acceptance of the child's comment belies a painful memory. He recalls a past where shadowy figures looked down on him, a beastkin among humans, sneering at his very existence. The memory is one of being forced to the ground, an echo of prejudice he knew all too well. The memory is interrupted when one of the young girls, Miria, approaches him with a question, assuming from his attire that he must be a girl who dislikes wearing skirts. The bluntness of the question leaves Caroline aghast. Before Caroline can intervene, another boy, Dan, steps up to defend Orca, stating that it's fine for girls to wear pants. The other children shout at Dan to stop, but the confusion is cleared when Orca calmly states that he is a boy, prompting a flurry of apologies from group. As the children decide to play a game of hide-and-seek, Caroline is lost in her own thoughts, feeling awful for her own hasty conclusions. She notes to herself that her brother Zex stayed home, leaving her to navigate this situation alone. The moment the seeker begins to count, Caroline seizes the opportunity. She grabs Orca's hand, startling him, and pulls him away from the game and the other children. She leads him through a bustling part of town where men are busy with guild deliveries. The mundane activity of the workers provides a stark contrast to the social complexities they just left behind. After a moment of walking in silence, Orca stops. He turns to Caroline, his expression serious, and asks her a direct question. Why did she invite him to town? Caroline smiles warmly, her answer simple and earnest. She tells him it's because she wants him to get to know Fornata, their home. Orca seems taken aback by the sincerity of her reason. She continues, praising her brother's brilliance, but admitting that she hopes to notice things that even he might miss. To bridge the gap between them, she asks Orca to drop the formal sama when addressing her. Finally, Caroline looks at him with resolve and apologizes for getting between him and her brother. She then declares passionately that while she wants to be his friend, she will never give up her place as her brother's #1 supporter. She continues, her voice softening as she looks down. She apologizes for acting cold, confessing that she was scared he would take her brother away from her. His expression softens, moved by her honesty. He tentatively calls out to her, trying out a nickname. Seeing his reaction, a blush spreads across Caroline's face as she declares that since they have both apologized, they can consider the matter even. As Orca shyly tries to call her by another name, she beams with a bright smile, praising him for his effort. Caroline playfully asserts her role as a dependable big sister to Orca, who looks at her in confusion. He points out that he is quite sure she is younger than him, but she dismisses his comment, insisting she is the little sister. Watching them from a balcony above, Karen smiles to himself. He reflects that perhaps he has been too overprotective and should let them grow on their own, feeling a sense of relief that he no longer needs to worry. A year has passed since Orca joined the Fornata family. Zex, now slightly older, asks Karen if he can practice magic with big sister Karen, playfully teasing his brother. Nearby, Orca asks a maid, Cheyenne, if she has seen Caroline, whom he now calls big sister Karen. Cheyenne replies that she saw her heading downstairs just a moment ago. Downstairs, Caroline quickly covers her mouth, trying to stifle the sound of her chewing. Her attempt fails as Orca finds her snacking. She cheerfully offers him a treat, declaring him a new member of the snack club. Orca admits that the aroma was so enticing he could smell it from down the hall. Elsewhere, in the estate's garden, Zex stands alone, wondering where the two of them have gone. He soon finds them. Caroline and Orca frantically deny doing anything, but Zex points out the cookie crumbs around both of their mouths. He internally notes with satisfaction that Orca has truly started to fit in. Just then, Karen arrives, asking if something has happened. The scene shifts, showing an older Zex and Karen in a study. Karen explains that since taking control of the Fornata territory, his reforms, promoting talented people regardless of status, have been successful. The domain now runs smoothly without his constant oversight, meaning it is time for him to move on to the next phase. Now appearing as a young man with dyed black hair and a mask, Zex stands with Cheyenne, buzzing with excitement. He internally marvels at the thought of becoming an adventurer, a dream from his modern world. He considers his disguise, the mask and black hair, noting that black signifies the possession of 5 or more attributes. He resolves to go all in on this undercover identity. Cheyenne, however, expresses doubt, questioning if kids can even register. He pushes forward with his plan, approaching the counter at the Adventurers Guild. He confidently tells the receptionist he would like to register. The woman welcomes him and hands over a form, explaining it is necessary to issue his guild card. Zex tells himself to focus on the task at hand. He considered the utility of his new persona. It would be useful in situations where Zex of the Fornata family could not appear. This identity would allow him to gather materials for weapons and armor through monster hunts, train himself in the process, and purchase equipment directly from merchants without raising suspicion among neighboring territories. The primary reason for registering under this disguise, he mused while filling out the paperwork, was to obtain an official ID. He preferred to avoid unnecessary attention, acknowledging that his father still held the official authority over the Fornata lands. The guild receptionist confirmed his new name, Mr. Seiss, and presented him with a guild card. She instructed him to channel his mana into it for personalization. As she began to explain the guild's regulations, Cheyenne, standing beside him, also started to speak, but Seiss cut them both off, stating it wasn't necessary. His curt dismissal drew the attention of a nearby group of adventurers. They began to mock him, speculating that his black hair was fake and calling him a self-absorbed wannabe. One of the men became confrontational, accusing Seiss of sneering at them and asking if he was looking for a fight, while the woman in their group suggested Cheyenne should leave him and join them instead. In response to their provocations, Seiss unleashed a palpable wave of intimidation. A powerful, unseen pressure radiated outwards from him, instantly silencing and overwhelming the belligerent adventurers. The effect was devastatingly effective. One of the men wet himself in terror, crying out in shock. As Seiss turned away, Cheyenne quietly asked if that was perhaps a bit much. He admitted that he had added a minor mental magic spell, paralysis, to the intimidation, conceding that the combination might have been too strong. He waved a hand dismissively, assuring Cheyenne it was fine. He explained that no one else there could sense mana, so they wouldn't know he was the caster. He then confirmed that she could perceive the lingering magic, which she did, thanking him for the training he'd provided. Cheyenne expressed a slight hesitation, questioning if it was truly all right to teach such a skill to someone like her. He reassured her that it was fine. He then stated that he would be relying on her again, this time to train this new adventurer Seiss. As they walked towards the guild's exit, he formally addressed her as Instructor Cheyenne, declaring that he was counting on her. She accepted her new role with a simple, "Yes, sir," leaving the stunned and paralyzed adventurers behind them. Several weeks passed. Under Cheyenne's direct supervision, Seiss undertook a variety of requests. During one such quest, he listened intently as she instructed him on gathering plants, explaining that if a request doesn't specify a particular part, it is always safest to bring the entire root. He is with Cheyenne when she suddenly stumbles and falls. Reacting instantly, he uses his magic to suspend her in midair, preventing her from hitting the ground. He calls out her name in alarm, asking if she is all right. As she floats, Cheyenne reminds him to always watch his footing, offering to cover him with her own magic. Back inside the mansion, he tells Cheyenne that he will be fine on his own from now on. He explains that he has ranked up to E-class and is no longer a rookie, so he can't keep relying on her forever. He trails off, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. A few weeks later, Cheyenne's concern has not faded. She asks him again if he is certain he will be all right by himself. Walking away, he reassures her that she worries too much, though she internally debates whether she should accompany him anyway. Meanwhile, from a window high up in the mansion, Orca, Karen, and Caroline watch the scene unfold. Orca points Zex out to the others, noting that he is sneaking out again. Caroline, surprised, asks if it's true that her brother has been leaving the estate without telling anyone. Down below, Zex stands on the grounds, looking back at the Grand Mansion. With a determined look and a clenched fist, he lets out a resolute shout, ready to continue his secret life as an adventurer. On a path outside of town, three figures come to a sudden halt. The sturdy boots of a young boy, the formal shoes of a young noblewoman, and the military-style footwear of a beastkin stop in unison. Hearing a rustle from the nearby foliage, Zex turns his head, his expression shifting to one of mild surprise. From behind a tree, Orca and Caroline emerge. Orca cries out in shock, recognizing his big brother. Caroline, however, immediately scolds him, stating that shadowing someone is poor manners. She quickly adds that the two of them were simply on their way into town to hang out. Her scolding tone vanishes as she turns to Zex with a bright, innocent smile, asking if he is also heading into town. Zex sighs, reluctantly agreeing to let them walk with him. As Orca and Caroline cheerfully grab his arms and pull him forward, he internally resolves to find a way to slip away from them once they arrive in town. As they continue, Caroline mentions hearing about an adventurers guild in town and a rumor that someone from the castle has been undertaking adventure work. She asks Orca if he knows about it, prompting the flustered beastkin to wonder aloud who could have leaked the secret, speculating it might have been the Knight Captain. Caroline then turns her gaze to Zex. With a weary expression, he holds up his hands in surrender and confirms that he is, in fact, the one. Her playful demeanor gone, Caroline gets serious. She states that she heard he was hunting monsters and acknowledges that while the knights are supposed to cull them, they are short on hands. She insists they need to talk properly. The conversation shifts focus to the Adventurers Guild itself. A receptionist explains that the guild is a state-run entity. It supports national security and provides work for adventurers by fielding hunt requests from townsfolk and merchant for monsters appearing on roads and farms. Zex then lays out the core problem. He explains that their domain, Forenata, is in decline, with no specialty products or notable features to attract people. Because of this, adventurers don't come to their territory. He concludes with the stark reality. He is the one taking down the monsters because no one else will. He listens as his siblings push back against his decision to work alone. Caroline insists that adventuring is dangerous work and that their help would lighten his burden. Orca chimes in with a fervent yeah. She continues her argument, stating that practice beats theory and that gaining field experience is crucial. Orca, however, looks on with concern, reminding them that there are no guarantees in a real fight and that they are worried about Zex. Standing side by side, Caroline and Orca make a heartfelt plea. They remind him that they too are members of House Forenata and implore their big brother to let them help protect their people. Faced with their determination, he finally relents. All right, he concedes, but sets a firm condition. They will only accompany him when he permits it. He warns that it would be a disaster for noble children to be seen near the Adventurers Guild. With that, he dons a white mask, declaring that this disguised form will be his persona going forward. Now, fully disguised, he lays out the plan. He will go to the guild to accept a request while they wait at the town gate. Afterward, they will regroup and head into the forest. His siblings are ecstatic. Caroline and Orca celebrate with a high five, thanking their brother profusely. As they rejoice, Zex watches them, internally remarking on how close they've become, though he admits to himself that he isn't thrilled about the timing. Their celebration is cut short. Orca holds up a quest form, his face contorted in fury as he realizes what? Tricked. Zex calmly explains that their task is an herb-gathering request, swearing that the monster hunt board just happened to be empty. Moving swiftly through the forest, Zex points out their target. He instructs them to cut the plant above its base, but only if it has grown over 30 centimeters. Trailing behind, Caroline expresses her confusion, noting that the plants aren't growing in clusters as they should, making the task tougher than she anticipated. He holds up one of the herbs, assuring them it isn't hard to find. He offers a hint. All living things, including plants, carry their own mana. The hint works. Orca lets out a gasp of understanding, and Caroline immediately grasps the concept, explaining that each species must have its own unique mana signature. She decides to take matters into her own hands. Activating her mana sight, the world transforms, and the distinct, glowing aura of the target herb becomes visible among the undergrowth. Her success immediately spurs Orca into action. With a grin, he declares that he's going to find some too, turning their task into a friendly competition to see who can find more. Caroline, meanwhile, proudly announces her find to Zex. The two of them eagerly begin their search, pointing out discoveries over here and over there. Orca suggests they divide the area to be more efficient, claiming one side for himself as Zex watches from distance. He cuts through their excitement, asking if they are forgetting something important. Startled, Caroline immediately uses her magic to scan their surroundings. She reports detecting a pack of gray wolves, first counting 4, but Orca quickly corrects her, stating there are 5. Zex is surprised, asking if they're using magic to sweep for monsters, and internally notes that Orca's detection ability is already sharper than his brother Karen's. Taking his words to heart, Caroline turns to Orca with a serious tone. She explains that while it's fine today because Zex is present to protect them, it's crucial to properly assign roles, like a lookout when they party up with others in the future. Orca quietly agrees. Zex affirms her point, reminding them that this is a dangerous forest. He states that getting so absorbed in gathering that they forgot to keep watch was a poor decision. With a final, sobering statement, he warns them that the gray wolves are about to become aware of their presence. With his sword drawn, Orca addresses Zex, asking for a chance to redeem himself for his past mistake. Beside him, Caroline adds her own plea, promising they will do their best and asking their brother to watch over them. Zex agrees to their request, but adds a condition. He will intervene if the situation becomes too dangerous. Filled with determination, both Orca and Caroline cheerfully accept his terms. They charge forward as a pack of wolves emerges from the trees, splitting into 3 groups. Caroline quickly assesses the situation, shouting for them to eliminate the center group before they can be surrounded. Orca acknowledges the order. In an instant, Caroline unleashes a fire arrow, engulfing one of the charging wolves in a massive burst of flame. As her spell hits its mark, another wolf lunges at Orca, who swiftly erects an ice wall to block the creature's attack. Watching from distance, Zex analyzes their strategy. He understands that with Orca acting as support, their formation makes sense, especially since Karen, a high firepower attacker, is not with them. His thoughts are interrupted by a loud howl from one of the wolves, a clear call for reinforcements. He expands his senses, mapping out the enemies. He counts 20 of them, still outside the children's range of perception. He realizes that while it's fine for now, the sheer number will soon be too much for them to handle. Suddenly, a powerful projectile slams into the head of a large, werewolf-like creature, killing it instantly. The surrounding pack of monsters stares in shock as their fallen comrades' empty potion bottles clatter to the ground. As the creature collapses, Zex reflects on his own progress. He used to be capable of only a single shot, but now he can fire as many as he pleases within his mana's range. He considers it one of the most powerful spells available. He remains unsatisfied, however, thinking his spell is still too slow. He resolves to make it as fast as a gun. Knowing the power of his bullets depends on the mana invested, he decides to focus on increasing his mana reserves, recognizing he can still improve. He watched from a distance as the battle concluded. A final wolf was impaled by a spike of stone erupting from the earth. Caroline, exhilarated, celebrated their victory, even claiming a kill for herself, while Orca stood by, more composed. She turned, asking if Zex had been watching them. After the fighting ceased, Caroline knelt beside one of the fallen beasts. With her hands clasped, she closed her eyes, and a soft light enveloped her as she offered a quiet prayer for the creature. Her moment of reverence passed, and Orca turned to Zex, reminding him that their task was to retrieve the magic stones from within the beasts. Zex offered to handle the grim work, but Orca firmly declined, stating his resolve to take full responsibility for the lives he had taken. Hearing this, Zex looked at the young beastkin with newfound respect. He realized, with some surprise, that Orca had matured far more than he had initially thought. As the 3 walked through the woods, Caroline recalled that one of the wolves had seemed to call for reinforcements. Zex casually confirmed that he had taken care of them. His nonchalant admission left both Caroline and Orca speechless, wondering how he could have possibly managed it while standing right beside them. Leaving the site of their hunt, both Caroline and Orca eagerly pleaded with Zex to teach them his techniques. He smiled, agreeing to save the lesson for their next outing, a promise they readily accepted. From that day on, the trio regularly ventured out to hunt magic beasts together. Through these excursions, they all steadily gained combat experience and grew stronger, with Zex documenting their shared progress. He found himself writing everything down in a diary. The more time he spent living in this world, the more the specific details of the game he once knew began to fade. He had started the journal to preserve that knowledge, but looking at it now, he saw it had become more of a political planner, filled with reminders to inspect the estate's livestock. Flipping through the pages, he read an entry noting the day his brother, Karen, rode a horse for the very first time. A laugh escaped him as he realized his chronicle of game strategies had slowly transformed into a parenting journal. Another entry detailed the time he caught Karen sneaking food he disliked off Caroline's plate, a transgression he decided to ignore. The thought solidified in his mind with a chuckle. At this point, it was undeniably a parenting journal. He stared down at the open book, his expression grim. The pages, filled with his own meticulous notes, chronicled the events he knew were to come. A quiet thought surfaced in his mind. It would soon be time. Upon his return to the manor with Caroline and Orca, he was greeted at the grand staircase by Cheyenne. Sensing the tense atmosphere, he immediately asked if something had happened at the castle. Cheyenne's face was grim as she delivered the news. The Northern Noble Alliance of the Holy Kingdom had started a conflict, specifically targeting Count Galbada and his 3 branch families. The word struck Orca like a physical blow. He paled, realizing his own family was among the targets. For Zex, it was a moment of dreadful confirmation. The event he had been preparing for had finally begun. The mage Cheyenne delivers grave news. A civil war has erupted in the northeast, and Count Galbada's family, along with 3 of its branches, has been attacked. Orca, a member of the beastskin race, is visibly shaken. Realizing this means his own family is in danger. Beside him, Caroline Flammerel calls out to her brother, Zex, her voice filled with concern. As Orca reels from the information, Caroline looks up at Zex, her worry deepening. She wonders aloud why her brother remains completely silent during such a tense moment. Zex's silence is one of cold calculation. Orca explains that his home, the Bayakudai barony, is one of Count Galbada's branch families. Internally, Zex recognizes the event from the game he played in his past life. He understands this civil war is the result of a long-running scheme by the monotheistic Fuensole family to annihilate the polytheistic Galbadas, and that this incident created a huge rift between species in the Holy Kingdom. He recalls the game's story, realizing this conflict is a pivotal event not just for Orca, but for many other key characters as well. As he weighs his options, Zex reaffirms his primary goal, preventing his brother Karen's death, a matter completely unrelated to this war. He had considered intervening, but decided against it, reasoning that getting involved could make his own family enemies of the monotheists. Furthermore, since Caroline possesses the light attribute, she would become a prime target if the monotheists discovered her, potentially dragging the royal family and the church into the fray. He turns to Orca and states plainly that there is no benefit for his family to get involved, as it has almost nothing to do with them. He points out the geographical distance, noting the Bayakudai barony is in the northeast while they are in the southwest. Orca looks down, his expression somber as he listens to the cold logic. Despite the harsh refusal, Orca forces a smile. He tells Zex not to worry, explaining that he doesn't expect the Fornata family to aid the Bayakudai. He claims his father and older brother had told him this day might come, and that he already knew, so he is fine. Caroline, however, cannot accept this. She erupts, questioning how he can just brush it off when his family might die. Orca, looking away, apologizes and says he'll have to skip their study session before turning to leave. As he walks away, Caroline cries out for him to wait and rushes forward, tripping over her own feet and falling to the floor. After Orca has gone, Zex turns to Cheyenne. He instructs her to tell the spies to redouble their efforts, but makes it clear that direct interference is strictly forbidden. Cheyenne looks at him, asking if he is sure. Zex confirms his order with a simple yes. Cheyenne acknowledges, as you wish, her gaze lifting towards the grand chandelier above as she processes the command. His orders were carried out swiftly. Under the cover of darkness, 2 small, cat-like figures, his newly assigned spies, darted across the estate grounds, their mission already underway. Meanwhile, back in Zex's chambers, the weight of the situation pressed down on both occupants. Zex collapsed onto his bed with a heavy sigh, while Orca slumped against the wall, questioning why he was only now feeling the full force of his worry, despite knowing this outcome was always a possibility. He lay there, wrestling with his conscience. If he abandoned Orca's family and allowed events to unfold as they did in the game, he could almost guarantee his brother Karen's safety. It was a cold, pragmatic calculation. The internal conflict caused him to sit bolt upright with a silent curse. Across the room, Orca forced a smile, insisting that he already knew this would happen and that he was fine. After Orca's departure, Zex sat on the edge of his bed, chiding himself for his emotional display. It was embarrassing for a grown adult, albeit in a child's body, to act this way. He acknowledged how useful it was to be able to cast mental magic on himself to keep his feelings in check, musing that a true story's protagonist likely wouldn't feel such doubt. Seeking to calm his nerves further, he decided to get some tea. As he reached for a cup in the pantry, his brother Karen appeared behind him, asking what was the matter and apologizing for disturbing him so late at night. Before he could answer, two more figures appeared in the doorway. It was Caroline, followed closely by Cheyenne. His younger sister looked up at him with wide, concerned eyes and called out his title, Oni Isama. In a quiet room, Caroline sips from a teacup. The warm beverage is chamomile, intended to help her sleep. She sits opposite her brother, Karen, in a lavishly decorated bedroom and asks him why he has sought her out. He explains that he wanted to discuss Orca's real family, the house of Baron Bayakadai. Leaning forward with a concerned expression, she immediately asks if he can send them aid in their current conflict. He looks away, his own face etched with pain. He thinks about how terribly sad it is to see Orca's tired, forced smile, but then states the harsh reality. They cannot act on emotion, or the Fornata family will lose all of its allies. He continues, explaining that as the one holding de facto power, he has a responsibility to protect their land. The noble faction attacking Orca's family is simply too large. He presses her, asking if she wants to put their own people in danger. Reluctantly, Caroline agrees that he is right, though her hesitation is plain. His expression twists in anguish. He internally laments that he cannot act, feeling crushed by Caroline's expectations. He had thought she, of all people, would understand his difficult position, but she does not. Caroline challenges him, recalling his earlier words about being the acting lord. She questions if sending backup would truly mean sacrificing their own knights and asks if he's willing to take responsibility for their defeat. She declares that she doesn't understand his reasoning. Her voice softens as she confesses the guilt she felt on the day he carried her home. She admits she felt sorry for causing him so much trouble, and that the feeling of constantly messing up was killing her inside. Karen immediately refutes this, insisting he never blamed her. He then turns her own words back on her, reminding her of what she said back then, that siblings who love each other should support one another. Her eyes sharpen. Was that all a lie? She asks. She reminds him that Orca is also their beloved little brother, a point underscored by a vision of the three of them happily together. Faced with this emotional appeal, Karen is left speechless as Caroline quietly states, "Okay, I understand." Her resolve hardening, she makes a quiet but firm declaration. If he will not help, then she will go herself. She clarifies her intent, stating she will go to help Orca and rescue his family, even if she must do it alone. With a polite, "Excuse me," she turns and walks out of the room. Karen, stunned, calls out for her to wait, but he is left alone in the now empty parlor. He collapses to the floor, crouching as a heavy sigh escapes him. The weight of the situation crashes down, and he questions what he is even doing. He buries his face in his hand, realizing he had just been lashing out, projecting his own anxieties onto his little sister. The shame burns on his face. He is her older brother, and he knows that older brothers should not lie to their little sisters. He steps into the hallway, finding Cheyenne waiting. He begins to explain what just happened with Caroline, but the maid simply replies that she already knows. Without another word, he turns and strides down the long, shadowed corridor, his expression now one of grim determination. He moves with purpose, his footsteps echoing in the empty hall as his capelet flutters behind him. He stops and calls out to Cheyenne. When she acknowledges him, he issues his orders. They are to hold a strategy meeting immediately to plan the rescue of Baron Bayakudai and his family. Stressing that time is of the essence, he instructs her to send a maid to summon everyone of importance. He turns to Cheyenne, his expression firm, and issues a startling command. He instructs her to inform the royal palace about his light magic. The order is so unexpected that it stops her in her tracks, her mind reeling in confusion as she can only manage a stunned utterance. He was the abandoned heir of Count Fornata. Though the daily management of the land was left to him, he possessed no authority to make decisions on his own behalf. No one held any interest in him, not his parents, not other nobles, and not even the people of his own territory. Meanwhile, in a study cluttered with documents, a steward lamented the state of affairs. He felt trapped, merely repeating the policies of the last lord, unable to do anything for their slowly declining territory. He mused that if only Lady Caroline showed a fragment of potential, it could turn everything around. A sudden knock on his door broke his concentration. The steward turned as the door creaked open, revealing the small figure of Zex. Surprised, the steward addressed the young lord, asking what the matter was as Zex announced his entry. He looked up at the man with a confident smile, addressing him as Suishan. With unexpected boldness, the young boy proposed that they make a deal. Later, Zex entered a meeting room where several of his retainers were already gathered. One greeted him, remarking with a laugh that he was the last to arrive and that everyone else was unusually early. He then asked if there was some reason Zex didn't want to work late. Zex, taking in the scene, appeared slightly taken aback. From his seat at the table, one of the men spoke respectfully. He explained that, considering Zex's personality, they had all been certain that he would choose to join the coming battle. His expression hardened as he questioned their assumption. He stated that while a typical noble might think staying out of the Civil War was the correct decision, he had already made up his mind. No matter how one looked at it, helping them fight simply made no sense to him. The long-haired noble standing nearby acknowledged his words. He confirmed that they understood, as they had been observing how Zex acted every day since a certain pivotal event. The scene shifts back to the steward's office, where Suishan reviewed the plan Zex had presented to revive the territory. He questioned its meaning, warning the boy to watch his words. He scoffed at the idea, stating they didn't have time to play pretend with a useless, colorless toddler. Zex remained composed. He conceded that while it was true he was a useless, colorless 5-year-old, he was still a true Fornada. And because of that, he declared he could at least sign off on any proposal he agreed with. He laid the choice bare before the steward and his retainer. After a period of tense negotiation, the path forward was simple. They could align with his father's stagnant rule or with him. The decision, he stated, was entirely theirs. To earn their trust, he invited the steward to inspect the farms, urging him to bring along trusted men to gather as many opinions as possible. He encouraged open criticism, asking the man to point out any mistakes he might make, and concluded by saying he was counting on him. Before long, however, his formal proposal was rejected, forcing him to send some of the old stocks as a temporary measure. Soon after, the steward presented a well-made list of public investments, ranked by importance. Zex thanked him and instructed him to carry out what he could. As he held the document, Zex's pen tapped the paper. He then revealed his true finding: evidence that the steward had been embezzling funds for the past several years. Cornered, the steward bowed deeply, giving his word. A nearby retainer questioned the wisdom of letting him off so easily, but Zex calmly explained that he would overlook it this time. The land, he reasoned, was lacking in talented people, but he made it clear that a second offense would be dealt with decisively. His political maneuvering was matched by his physical training. During a session with his instructor, Yaf, a powerful strike sent a massive practice pillar crashing to the ground. From the sidelines, Caroline cheered enthusiastically for her brother. The display of power stunned the watching retainers, who admitted they were mere muscle brains in comparison. Inspired, Caroline declared she wanted another fight and announced extra lessons for everyone that night. In response, Zex turned to the men, wooden sword at the ready. He challenged them all to come at him at once, acknowledging their desire to impress Caroline, but calling their previous efforts reckless. His sister watched him, a faint blush on her cheeks. His challenge ignited their fighting spirit. The lead retainer roared in acceptance, rallying the others to the fight. From a window above, Suishan observed, noting Zex's promise to provide wine for everyone's dinner if he were to lose. And so, as a result of his behavior, a blend of shrewd politics and undeniable strength, Zex began to reshape the loyalties of those around him. His decisive actions had their intended effect. Gradually, every one of the retainers began to see him not as a mere child, but as something more. They entrusted themselves to him, finally recognizing the boy as the true future of the Fornada territory. Later, Suishan questions Zex's decision to mobilize the territory for what appears to be a personal reason. The steward observes that Zex cares deeply for his siblings and is much like his parents, so of course he would rush to help them. Zex, seated calmly, simply asks if they are all certain about this course of action. In response, the assembled retainers speak as one, affirming their complete trust in him. A bright smile spreads across his face as he accepts their pledge. He thanks them, declaring he will put them to good use. The men shout their affirmation, though one has the fleeting thought that the phrasing was slightly unsettling. His focus then shifts to logistics. Zex asks if they will make it in time, and Suishan confirms their destination. The Byakudai barony is a month's journey by carriage. Zex dismisses the concern with a wave of his hand, casually revealing that they will be using Karen's light magic. The entire room falls into a stunned silence. The silence breaks as the retainers erupt in disbelief. They demand to know how Karen could use light magic, and how long this has been kept secret from them. Zex, unfazed, simply points out that he just told them now. He allows himself a small, knowing smirk. There are, after all, many benefits to keeping one's trump cards close to the chest. One of the retainers calls out his name, still reeling from the revelation. Far away, at the gates of the Byakudai barony, a carriage pulls to a stop, its arrival marking the start of the very events Zex now races to influence. As preparations are made, Orca rushes towards Zex, calling out his name. He declares that since they're going to support the Byakudai barony, he is coming with them. Zex calmly agrees. He looks intently at the young beastkin, warning him that he will witness awful things on this journey. Orca's expression is filled with pleading determination. Orca insists, admitting he may only be able to show them around, but still begs to go. Seeing his resolve, Zex relents, telling him to hurry and get ready as they are leaving immediately. Overjoyed, Orca thanks him profusely. Nearby, the long-haired man, Brucerda, explains his reasoning to Karen and Caroline. He admits he thought they had agreed not to bring Orca, but realized the boy would have followed anyway, making it safer for him to be with them. He adds that having an influential local along is also a strategic benefit. In response, Caroline turns to Karen, noting that their strategy depends on him and asking if he is certain. Karen affirms his decision, stating he doesn't want to just sit back and give orders, believing it's right to work alongside their knights. Understanding his conviction, Caroline says she will be counting on him. Brucerda then formally outlines the plan to the group. As knight captain, he will take command. They will reinforce their party with a small elite unit. He himself will join disguised as a mercenary named Quirce, while they will all pretend the infant Zex was left behind at the manor. With the strategy set, he gives the order to depart. Moments later, the group travels at an astonishing pace. Brucerda checks on Orca, who confirms he is fine despite the speed, which Brucerda notes is 8 times normal. Zex, amazed, internally reviews the plan and decides to boost everyone with a magic coat to increase their speed even further. At that moment, Karen tells Caroline it is about time. She agrees, announcing, "Here I go," as she prepares to cast her own spell. A surge of magical energy envelopes the horse, pulling their carriage. The spell's full energy and toughness manifest as a brilliant aura, and the animal rears, empowered. The carriage becomes a blur, streaking across the landscape at an impossible velocity. Zex reflects that with Karen's light magic sustaining them, they can now travel on horseback without ever needing to stop. He and his companions have stopped to rest for the night. Gathered around a crackling campfire, the small party takes a brief respite from their high-speed journey through the dark forest. As they rest, he assesses the condition of their party, noting that while the knight's physical stamina might recover, they are still mentally exhausted. Nearby, Brucerda asks Caroline if she is tired, but she insists she can keep going, though her weary expression suggests otherwise. To aid their recovery, a gentle magic fills the air. A comforting spell, Warm Heart, emanates from the center of the camp, bathing the weary travelers in a soothing, restorative light. Amidst the calming atmosphere, he approaches Cheyenne, offering her some food. He internally resolves to keep as many people as possible unaware of the true situation. Cheyenne, flustered, accepts his offer, while Caroline happily thanks her brother for the meal. His gaze shifts to his sister, prompting a realization. He understands now that Caroline's deep affection for Orca must have been a trigger for her light magic. Cheyenne marvels at the power of the spell, noting that they are already halfway to their destination. The mention of light magic brings a new concern to his mind. He realizes that after this mission, it will become widely known that Karen can also use light magic, a fact that could have significant repercussions. This concern brings to mind another delicate situation, one involving his brother, Karen, and his trusted maid, Cheyenne. In a private moment, Karen had asked for her thoughts, wondering if her adoptive family being in danger was the spark for her actions. He then questioned what would happen, suggesting she would lose all trust as a spy if she didn't report back to the court first. Her foot taps nervously on the floor as she processes his questions. Cheyenne turns to face him, asking why he cares so much about her circumstances. She points out that even if the court blacklists her, it shouldn't cause him any distress. Karen hesitates, searching for the right words. He finally finds his voice, looking at her with sincerity. Cheyenne admits plainly that she is a spy, to which Karen replies that he already knows. He explains that he simply didn't want to put her in a difficult position and now sees her as a subordinate he can truly trust, though he still felt it was important to express his feelings. Back at the camp, the brief rest comes to an end. Orca enthusiastically praises Karen, noting that at their current pace, they will reach the Bayakudai barony by noon the next day. Brucerda gives the order to move out, and the knights respond with a unified cry, ready to continue their journey through the night. He stands at the carriage door as Orca expresses confidence that they will arrive in time. Brucerda confirms this, but gently reminds the beastkin of his alias, Quirce, prompting a quick realization from Orca. Inside, Caroline echoes Orca's hopeful sentiment, her hands clasped together as he smiles warmly beside her. Orca chuckles sheepishly, admitting he messed up and must be more careful. The journey continues at a rapid pace. Though the civil war has already begun, their speed gives them hope that, even in the worst-case scenario, they can still save the entire Bayakudai family. Despite the group's optimism, Zex is gripped by a sense of foreboding. He stares intently at the object in his hand, questioning the source of his profound unease. His premonition proves true as the carriage grinds to a halt. Brucerda steps out onto the road, and the others follow, their expressions shifting to horror. Orca lets out a choked gasp, unable to believe what he is seeing. Before them lies a scene of utter devastation. The entire village has been reduced to smoldering ruins and rubble, a silent testament to a recent brutal attack. The group stands amidst the ruins of a desolate village, the air heavy with the silence of death. Brucerda surveys the scene, murmuring about the awfulness of it all. Below, the corpse of a Bayakai soldier lies among the rubble, prompting Zex to wonder if the soldier died, trying to intercept the attackers. A soldier rushes to Brucerda, addressing him as captain. He reports that the entire village has been checked, confirming there are no survivors. Furthermore, all valuables and provisions have been looted. Brucerda grimly acknowledges the report, his expression hardening at the confirmation of total loss. The soldier then turns his attention towards Zex, addressing him with the formal honorific Quirce Dano. Zex's gaze, however, is fixed beyond the soldier. He watches as Orca kneels beside the body of a fallen beastkin officer in ornate, blood-stained armor. Looking up at the others, Orca's voice is strained as he identifies the deceased man as Baron Baikadai. He confirms with certainty that this is his father. He then turns back to the body, overcome with grief. Clutching a piece of the armor, Orca whispers the word father into the silence. Suddenly, a small voice cuts through the somber atmosphere. Caroline has appeared beside Zex, telling him they need to hurry. She explains that they are at the southernmost edge of the barony and might still be able to save other villages if they make haste. Her words spur Brucerda to action. He commands his troops to get into formation, announcing their departure for the next village. Standing beside a stoic Cheyenne, Zex quietly affirms the decision. Caroline, however, does not follow. She walks toward the grieving Orca, gently calling out to him with the name Karen Chan. She kneels and introduces herself as Caroline Flameral Ui Seri Fornada. She tells Orca that it's nice to meet him and that they are family now, assuring him that they love him very much. Clasping her hands, she offers a prayer for his father to rest in peace. The unexpected, pure-hearted gesture causes Orca to break down completely, tears streaming down his face. He collapses before his father's body, letting out a gut-wrenching wail. As Orca grieves, Caroline and Cheyenne watch with somber expressions, while Zex, his face hidden by a mask, surveys the smoldering ruins of the village. Zex reflects on the grim reality of the situation. The invasion was far quicker than he had imagined. There were 4 villages in the barony, and by the time they reached this third one, they had yet to find a single person alive. Everyone, men, women, and children, had been slaughtered. He knew from the original story that every member of the Bayakudai family, apart from Orca, was fated to die. But he now understands that reading about such a tragedy is entirely different from experiencing it firsthand. His gaze shifts to the grieving Orca, and he decides to cast a calming spell on him as well. Raising a hand, he murmurs the incantation, and a sense of tranquility washes over the beastskin. At that moment, Brucerda, the knight captain, approaches the group. He directs his attention to Zex, stating that he has a report for Shursdano. He kneels before Zex, who asks for the report. The captain reveals that, despite his noble appearance, he is actually the Order's best scout, a skill honed from his days growing up as a commoner. Zex is surprised by this revelation. Meanwhile, Caroline and Cheyenne discuss the bleak outlook. Cheyenne notes that the village is lost and that any survivors who fled to the castle are in grave danger, as it's only a matter of time before it is breached. Caroline soberly adds that with so many dead, the barony will likely be dissolved regardless of their efforts. Brucerda continues his report, explaining that he couldn't see inside the castle or gauge the number of wounded. He could only confirm that with Baron Bayakudai's death, someone else has taken command. Overhearing this, Caroline asserts it must be her brother, whom she calls the smartest of them all. Zex agrees that this is the most likely possibility. From a nearby hiding spot, a small figure emerges. A young beastkin girl, her eyes filled with tears of relief, looks toward the group and calls out, "Nisama, you're alive." She rushes forward, declaring that their priority must be to rescue the survivors. The girl then reveals a critical piece of information. She knows a secret passage into the castle, a route known only to her family. Seizing the opportunity, Zex asks her, "Can you show us?" He watches as Orca's sister, tears welling in her eyes, apologizes for her earlier hesitation. Quickly composing herself, she insists that this is no time for tears and that they must focus on saving the remaining survivors. Acknowledging her newfound resolve, Zex tells her they will be counting on her, and she firmly agrees. His expression now hidden behind his mask, he reveals the name of the enemy commander to a stunned Brucerda. Vessel Errol G.A. St. Febern. Brucerda questions if he is serious, repeating the name Febern in shock. Internally, Zex confirms the gravity of the situation. This man is one of the game's major bosses. When one of Brucerda's men asks about the enemy's strength, Zex provides the intelligence: 300 infantry, 12 knights, and 5 mages. Brucerda observes that the numbers themselves are not insurmountable, but the true problem lies with their commander. This confirms Zex's own thoughts, as he finally understands why the invasion was so swift. He realizes that Febern, a count and a fanatical general of the monotheistic faction, would eagerly seize any opportunity to purge those he deems heretics. Their planning is abruptly interrupted by the arrival of Caroline and Karen, calling out for their brother. At the same time, Orca's sister grabs Zex's arm, desperately pleading with him not to go. She argues that it is too dangerous and that they should focus only on rescuing the survivors and fleeing together. Zex, however, remains resolute, calmly stating his intention to deal with the enemy general, Vessel, himself. The young beastkin girl presses on, questioning if he doesn't desire revenge, revealing she knows that Vessel is the man who killed Baron Baikadai. But she quickly dismisses the thought, crying out that revenge doesn't matter. His survival is what's most important. Her plea turns to desperation as she begs him not to go, fearing he will die just as her own father did. As she clings to his cloak, Zex quietly begins to remove his mask. Kneeling before Orca's sister, Brucerda attempts to reassure her. He explains that their role is merely a diversion to buy time for Orca's group to rescue citizens from the territory, promising they will retreat before the situation becomes truly dangerous and telling her not to worry. He continues, emphasizing that this action is essential to increase the chances of success for Orca's operation. With a look of concern still on her face, Orca's sister listens as he urges her to have faith in her brother. As the young Beastkin girl turns, Caroline speaks up with conviction. She states that her own brother, Zex, has always done what is best for them, and if he says this is the best plan, then it must be true. To reinforce her words, Caroline gently takes Orca's sister's hand. Despite the comforting gesture, the girl's ears twitch with anxiety as she begins to voice her lingering doubt, crying out. But, from a distance, Zex observes the tense exchange, his expression serious as he watches the events unfold. Moved by Caroline's support, Orca's sister's eyes well up with tears. "Thank you," she whispers, her voice thick with emotion as Caroline gently pats her on the head. The brief moment of calm is shattered. Orca's sister suddenly cries out in terror, calling for her brother and for Zex. Caroline looks up, her face instantly mirroring the alarm and fear. Reacting in an instant, Brucerda pulls both girls into a tight, protective embrace. "What is it?" he asks, his voice steady as he shields them with his own body. The three of them stand huddled together on the grassy ground, their cloaks overlapping in their close proximity. Without warning, a brilliant and violent flash of light erupts nearby, accompanied by a sharp, concussive sound that tears through the air. Amidst the rubble from the recent explosion, Orca's sister points towards a path, explaining that it leads out to the territory's administrative office. Following her lead, the group gathers at the exit. Brucerda establishes the order of their movement, declaring that he will take the lead, followed by Orca's sister, then Lady Caroline, with his men bringing up the rear. A subordinate acknowledges with a sharp cry. Meanwhile, far from their position, Zex stands alone, casting a wide-ranging spell. Concentric rings of magical energy expand outwards from him, a technique identified as detection. His spell reveals that enemy soldiers are massing at a single location, intending to break through the castle gate with brute force. Standing beside Brucerda, Zex relays this information. Brucerda, the vice commander, remarks that he's still not used to Zex's current appearance. He dismisses Zex's jest that he could have handled this alone, stating he would never permit it. Zex soberly warns him not to mistake him for an enemy in the chaos, and Brucerda promises to do his best. He then turns to his men, announcing it is time to move out. He instructs them to approach the enemy, and after he unleashes his own magic, they are to act based on their own judgment. His subordinate confirms the order. Just as they prepare to depart, Zex suddenly dashes forward alone. The subordinate cries out his name in alarm. Zex shouts back for them to follow at full speed, warning that he will not wait for them. He moves with astonishing speed, leaving a stunned Brucerda watching him go, who can only mutter in disbelief at how fast he is. Even with Brucerda and his subordinate on horseback, the distance between them and Zex only grows. Zex propels himself forward by creating shimmering magical platforms beneath his feet, using them as springboards to leap through the air. At the castle gate, two guards stand watch. One sighs, telling his companion not to let his guard down. The other seems unconcerned, stating that all that's left is for the mages to destroy the gate and end the battle, leaving nothing for them to do in the meantime. His more vigilant companion turns to him, questioning his lax attitude. As he does, a faint, high-pitched sound begins to echo from the distance. The soldier's alarm is justified. From the sky, Zex descends upon the enemy ranks, his body a projectile aimed at the heart of the siege. The soldiers below can only look up in shock, one crying out a warning as impact becomes imminent. He lands not with a physical blow, but with a crushing wave of pure intimidation. The immense pressure radiates outwards, sending soldiers flying and kicking up a cloud of dust, clearing a space around him in an instant. As the first wave of foes is scattered, he crouches, assessing the battlefield. He internally concludes that enemies of this level are no match for him, regardless of their numbers. The real problem, he senses, is something else entirely. His thought is cut short by a sudden, massive wall of magical energy erupting from the side, tearing through the battlefield indiscriminately. Zex looks up, his eyes wide with surprise, realizing this new attack is late to the fray. The force of the blast slams into the area, throwing Zex to the ground. He can only watch in shock as the raw power crushes soldiers around him without distinction. Pushing himself up, Zex turns to face the source of the devastating attack. A warrior with long, light-toned hair stands amidst the carnage, a smirk on their face. They remark with surprise that Zex survived the blow, noting that his reputation as a berserker who attacks friend and foe alike is well-deserved. The warrior's smirk widens into a grin as they declare that this dull assignment has suddenly become entertaining. Zex, however, feels no amusement. A cold sweat breaks out on his face as he realizes his intimidation aura has absolutely no effect. He knows this person, Vessel Errol G.A. Sanfibrin,